Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever noticed the weight of silence? I'm not talking about the soothing silence you feel sitting on your porch at sunset, but the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums until you can hear your own heartbeat. I'm talking about the silence in the Black Hills, 50 miles deep, where cell phones don't work and the nearest person feels like they're on another planet. My name is Travis Montroe, and I've been working as a forest ranger for the U.S. Forest Service for about 8 months now. Before that, I worked as a construction worker in Rapid City for 6 months and saved up money to come here. I've dreamed of this job since I was a child. The days I spend alone in the wilderness, the routine maintenance of trails, observing wildlife up close, protecting the forest. I don't consider myself a social person, so when they assigned me to the Black Hills rural area, I was as happy as if I'd won the lottery. I should have known better. They tell you in training that the wilderness changes you. That after enough time alone out there, you start to see yourself differently. Smaller, more insignificant. They say it's healthy, that it keeps your ego in check. Reminds you that nature doesn't care about your problems or your plans. What they don't tell you is that sometimes, late at night when you're 40 miles from the nearest road, you start to wonder if you're really alone at all. This story starts 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning that seemed like any other. I'd gotten a call from dispatch around 6 a.m. There'd been a report of illegal camping near the old Deadwood Ridge mining district. The area had been abandoned since the 1950s, when the mines dried up and the companies pulled out, leaving behind a network of tunnels and access roads that now belong to the forest. We got calls like this maybe once or twice a season. Usually just backpackers who wandered off trail looking for a unique camping spot. The difference this time was the details. The hikers who'd reported it, a couple from Minnesota doing a week-long trek, said they'd seen campfires. Multiple fires spread out over what looked like a quarter mile. They said the fires were too organized to be natural, too deliberate, and they said they'd heard sounds coming from that direction. Metallic sounds, like tools on rock, echoing down through the valleys. I remember standing in the ranger station kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, watching the coffee maker sputter out its morning brew. My supervisor, Dale Hutchins, was talking, but I was only half listening. Something about the hiker's story didn't sit right with me. The Deadwood Ridge area was remote even by backcountry standards. You had to hike in from the South Access Road, and that road itself required a four-wheel drive just to navigate. It wasn't the kind of place casual campers stumbled into by accident. "Monroe, you listening?" Dale's voice crackled through the phone. "Yeah, sorry, just thinking. Aerial recon couldn't spot anything yesterday, but with that tree cover up there, I'm not surprised. I need you to drive out, check the area, and report back. If you find illegal campers, document everything. Photos, GPS coordinates, the works. Don't engage unless you absolutely have to. Just get me the information so we can send a team if necessary." "Got it. What about the fires?" There was a pause on the other end. "What about them?" "The hikers said they saw multiple fires. That's a lot of people for an illegal camping operation, and we're under a burn ban right now. Anyone out there knows they're taking a serious risk. That's exactly why I'm sending you. If someone's running some kind of operation out there, we need to know about it. Could be anything. Illegal logging, poaching, hell. Could be a grow operation for all we know. Just be careful, keep your radio on, and check in every few hours." I hung up and finished my coffee, trying to shake the uneasy feeling settling into my gut. The thing about working in the wilderness is that you develop instincts. After enough time out there, your subconscious picks up on patterns your conscious mind misses. The way birds go quiet before a storm, how the forest feels different when a predator's nearby. And right then, drinking lukewarm coffee in a ranger station that smelled like pine cleaner and old boots, my instincts were screaming at me that something was wrong. But I'm a ranger. It's my job to go check these things out, no matter how I feel about them. So I loaded up my truck with gear, grabbed my pack, and headed out. The drive to the South Access Road took about 2 hours. The last 30 miles were on increasingly rough Forest Service roads, the kind that are barely maintained and turn into muddy nightmares after heavy rain. Fortunately, we hadn't had rain in almost 3 weeks, the whole reason we had a burn ban in the first place. The drought had turned the forest into a tinderbox, every pine needle and fallen branch ready to ignite at the slightest spark. Around 9 a.m., I reached the trailhead where the hikers had started their trek. I parked my truck, checked my gear one more time, and shouldered my pack. The trail leading north toward Deadwood Ridge was clearly marked, a well-maintained path that saw regular use during the summer months. But as I started walking, I noticed something that made me pause. There were fresh tire tracks in the dirt parking area. Not mine. These were wider, deeper, like they'd been made by something heavier than my Ranger truck. I knelt down and examined them more closely. The tracks led from the parking area to a barely visible side road that branched off into the trees. I pulled out my map and studied it. That side road wasn't on any official Forest Service maps, but that wasn't unusual. There were hundreds of old logging roads and mining access routes throughout the Black Hills, most of them abandoned and slowly being reclaimed by the forest. I stood there for a moment, debating. My instructions were to check the Deadwood Ridge area, which meant following the main trail north, but these tire tracks were fresh, maybe a day old at most, and they were heading in roughly the same direction as my destination. I made a decision. I'd follow the tracks for a bit, see where they led. If they diverged too far from my route, I'd come back and take the main trail. I radioed my position to dispatch, told them I was investigating fresh vehicle tracks, and headed into the trees. The side road was barely a road at all, more like a suggestion of where a road used to be. Saplings had sprouted up through the packed dirt, and in places the vegetation was so thick I had to push through it. But the tire tracks were unmistakable. 2 parallel lines cutting through the undergrowth like scars. I walked for about 20 minutes, climbing gradually as the road wound up the slope. The forest around me was dense with ponderosa pine and black spruce, their branches creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into pale green shafts. Normally, I loved this part of the job. The solitude, the beauty, the sense of being completely disconnected from the modern world. But today something felt off. The forest was too quiet. I'd been hiking for 20 minutes and hadn't heard a single bird call, hadn't seen any signs of wildlife. Even the insects seemed absent. Just silence, pressing in from all sides. And then I smelled it. Smoke. Not the sharp, acrid smell of a recent fire, but the lingering scent of old burning. Charcoal and ash, mixed with something metallic. The smell was faint, but unmistakable, carried on a breeze that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I pulled out my radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Monroe. I'm picking up signs of a previous burn in the area. Going to investigate further." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Monroe. Keep us updated. And be careful. If there's still hot spots, we don't want you getting caught in a flare-up." I continued forward, moving more slowly now, all my senses on high alert. The tire tracks led me around a bend, and suddenly the forest opened up into a small clearing, and that's where I found it. There were 3 tents set up in a rough triangle, each one facing inward toward a central fire pit. The fire was still smoldering, thin wisps of smoke rising into the morning air. But the tents were empty. All 3 of them had their flaps wide open, and I could see inside. Sleeping bags laid out neatly, camping gear arranged with almost military precision, but no people. I approached slowly, one hand on the radio clipped to my belt. "Hello?" I called out. "This is U.S. Forest Service. Anyone here?" No response. Just that oppressive silence broken only by the soft crackle of dying embers. I walked around the camp, documenting everything with my camera. The setup was strange. Too organized for casual campers, but lacking any of the equipment you'd expect from a professional operation. No vehicles were visible, though those tire tracks I'd been following led right to the camp. No food storage containers, no trash, no signs that anyone had actually been living here. And then I saw the rock face at the far end of the clearing. It was a small cliff, maybe 15 feet high, formed by what looked like an old rock slide. And carved into the stone, right at eye level, was a single word: wait. The letters were crude but deliberate, carved deep into the rock with something sharp. Below them, someone had scratched a series of tally marks. I counted 23 of them, arranged in groups of 5. I stood there staring at that word, and for the first time in my career as a ranger, I felt genuinely afraid. Not the healthy fear that comes with spotting a mountain lion or getting caught in a sudden storm. This was different. This was the primal fear that lives in the back of every human brain, the fear that tells you you're being watched by something you can't see. I took photos of the carved word and the tally marks, then backed away from the rock face. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't just illegal camping. This felt deliberate, purposeful, like a message meant for someone specific, or maybe a warning for anyone who stumbled across it. I was about to radio dispatch when I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. It was coming from deeper in the forest beyond the rock face, a metallic scraping sound, rhythmic and steady, like a pickaxe hitting stone. The same sound the hikers had reported hearing. I should have turned around right then, should have radioed for backup and waited for a team to arrive. But something compelled me forward. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the stupid kind of bravery that comes from not yet knowing how dangerous a situation really is. Whatever it was, I found myself moving toward the sound, leaving the empty camp behind. The forest beyond the clearing was different somehow. The trees seemed older, their trunks wider and their branches more gnarled. The undergrowth was thinner, as if something had been regularly clearing it away, and the smell of smoke was stronger here, mixed with that metallic scent I couldn't quite identify. The scraping sound grew louder as I walked. It was definitely coming from somewhere ahead, echoing through the trees in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint the exact direction. I tried to move quietly, stepping carefully to avoid snapping branches or rustling dry leaves. And then I saw her. A woman was standing about 30 yards ahead of me, her back turned, staring at something I couldn't see. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore hiking boots and outdoor gear that looked expensive but well used. In her hand, she held what looked like a handheld GPS device. "Excuse me," I called out, keeping my voice calm and professional. "Ma'am, this is U.S. Forest Service. I need to ask you some questions." She didn't turn around. Didn't even acknowledge that she'd heard me. She just stood there, completely still, staring ahead into the forest. I approached slowly, one hand instinctively moving to the can of bear spray on my belt. Something about her stillness was unnatural, wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. "Ma'am," I said again, now only about 10 feet away. "I need you to turn around and identify yourself." And then she spoke, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "Do you hear it too?" I stopped walking. "Hear what?" "The scraping, the digging. It's coming from the mine." "What mine?" "Ma'am, I need you to turn around." Finally, slowly, she turned to face me. And when I saw her eyes, I understood why she hadn't responded. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking through me, her gaze unfocused and distant. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted, and there were dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days. "They're waiting," she whispered. "They've been waiting for so long, and now they're ready." "Who's waiting? Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" She blinked, and suddenly she seemed to see me for the first time. Her eyes focused, and a look of confusion crossed her face. Who are you?" she asked, stumbling backward. "I'm a ranger with the U.S. Forest Service. My name's Travis Monroe. What's your name?" "Lydia," she said softly. "Lydia Stone. I'm a volunteer with the conservation program. I came out here to... She trailed off, looking around as if seeing the forest for the first time. "Where am I? How did I get here?" This was getting stranger by the second. "Ms. Stone, when's the last thing you remember?" She shook her head, confused. I was at the volunteer station yesterday morning. They asked me to check some trail markers in the northern sector, but I can't remember." The metallic scraping sound rang out again, louder this time, and Lydia's head snapped toward it. Her eyes went wide with what looked like recognition, or maybe fear. "The mine," she whispered. "That's where it's coming from. The old redemption mine. I can hear them digging." "Hear who digging?" She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I'd never forget. A desperate, pleading terror that went beyond rational fear. "I don't know," she said. "But whatever's down there, it's been waiting for someone to find it. And now it knows we're here." That's when I noticed the sound had stopped. The scraping, the metallic rhythm that had been echoing through the forest. It was gone. The silence that replaced it was somehow worse, heavy, and expectant, like the forest itself was holding its breath. And from somewhere in that silence, impossibly faint but unmistakable, I heard it, my own name, whispered by a voice that shouldn't exist. "Travis." Lydia heard it too. I could tell from the way her whole body went rigid, her eyes darting to the tree line where the sound seemed to have come from. Except it didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere, a whisper that surrounded us like fog. "We need to leave," she said, her voice tight. "Right now." For once, I agreed completely. Whatever was happening here was beyond my pay grade, and definitely beyond any training the Forest Service had given me. I grabbed Lydia's arm, she was swaying slightly like she might collapse, and started pulling her back toward the camp. "Can you walk?" I asked. She nodded, though she didn't look steady. "I think so. I feel strange, like I've been asleep for days." We moved as quickly as we could through the forest, retracing my steps back to the clearing with the tents. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just experienced. Voices don't echo through forests like that. Sounds don't surround you from all directions unless they're coming from above, and whatever I'd heard wasn't coming from the canopy. When we reached the camp, I pulled out my radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Monroe. I found a disoriented hiker at the Deadwood Ridge area. Female, mid-20s, appears to be suffering from exposure or possible head trauma, requesting immediate assistance." The radio crackled, but the response was garbled. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. Nothing but static. "Damn it," I muttered. We were in a valley, surrounded by ridges that could interfere with radio signals. It happened sometimes, but the timing couldn't have been worse. "What about your phone?" Lydia asked. I pulled it out, already knowing what I'd see. No signal. We were too deep in the backcountry. "All right," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "We're going to hike back to my truck. It's about a 40-minute walk. Once we get there, I'll be able to radio for help and we can get you checked out by medical personnel." Lydia nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "Okay, but can we please hurry? I don't want to be here when it gets dark." I glanced at my watch. It was only 10:30 in the morning. We had plenty of daylight left. But I understood her urgency. I felt it too, that primal need to get away from this place as fast as possible. We started back along the old road I'd followed earlier. Lydia walked beside me, silent for the first few minutes. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "I remember more now," she said. "About yesterday. I was checking trail markers like I told you, but I heard something. Music, I think. Or maybe singing. It was coming from off-trail, and I thought maybe someone needed help, so I followed it. And then, nothing. It's like there's a gap in my memory. The next thing I know, I'm standing in the forest and you're calling out to me." I glanced at her. "How do you feel? Physically, I mean. Any headaches? Dizziness?" "I'm tired, really tired. And thirsty. But otherwise okay, I think." I handed her my water bottle, and she drank gratefully. We walked in silence for a few more minutes, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that we were being followed. But every time I looked, there was nothing. Just trees and shadows and that oppressive silence. "Can I ask you something?" Lydia said suddenly. "Sure. Back there, when we heard that voice, did it say your name?" I didn't want to answer, didn't want to confirm what we'd both experienced, but I'd never been a good liar. "Yeah, it did." "How is that possible?" "I don't know. Audio illusion, maybe. Wind through the trees can make strange sounds." She looked at me, and I could tell she didn't believe my explanation any more than I did. "It knew your name, Travis. That wasn't wind." We rounded a bend in the road, and I stopped so abruptly that Lydia nearly walked into me. Ahead of us, blocking the path, was a massive fallen tree. It was a ponderosa pine, easily 100 years old, and it had come down across the road in a way that would make it impossible to climb over or go around. The trunk was too high, and the surrounding forest was too dense. "This wasn't here before," I said quietly. "Maybe you took a different route." I shook my head. "No, I came exactly this way. There was no fallen tree." Lydia looked at the tree, then back at me. "So what do we do?" I studied the obstacle, my mind working through options. The tree was fresh. I could see white wood where it had broken, could smell the sap bleeding from the wound. It had fallen recently, maybe within the last hour, but I hadn't heard anything. In the silence of the forest, a tree this size coming down would have sounded like an explosion, unless I'd been too far away to hear it. Unless it had fallen while I was in that clearing with the carved words, while I was hearing impossible voices whisper my name. "We go around," I finally said. "There's got to be a way through." We left the road and pushed into the forest, fighting through undergrowth that seemed determined to slow us down. Branches grabbed at our clothes, roots tried to trip us, and the terrain was rocky and uneven. It took us 20 minutes to bypass the fallen tree and get back to the road on the other side. When we finally emerged, sweating and scratched up, I checked my GPS to get our position. According to the device, we were exactly where we should be, about 20 minutes from my truck. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Come on," I said to Lydia. "We're almost there." We hurried down the road, both of us eager to reach civilization. The truck represented safety, communication, a way out of whatever weirdness we'd stumbled into. I started running through what I'd tell Dale and the other rangers. An investigation would be needed, maybe even state police if Lydia had been drugged or assaulted somehow. Those tents, that carved message, the missing time, none of it was normal. The road curved around a small ridge, and there, finally, I saw my truck parked exactly where I'd left it. Except, "Is that your truck?" Lydia asked, her voice hesitant. I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at what I was seeing. My Ranger truck was there, but it was covered in dust and debris, like it had been sitting abandoned for weeks instead of a few hours. The tires were flat, the windows were filthy, and when I got closer, I could see that rust had formed around the wheel wells and door handles. What the hell? I approached slowly, feeling like I was in a dream. This couldn't be my truck. But the license plate matched. The equipment sticker on the window matched. Even the dent in the rear bumper from where I'd backed into a post last month. It was all there. I tried the door. Locked. I fumbled for my keys with shaking hands, finally got it open. The interior was just as bad. Dust covered everything, and there was a musty smell like the truck had been closed up for a long time. On the driver's seat, something caught the light. My Ranger hat. The one I'd been wearing this morning. I picked it up, and dust fell from it in clouds. The fabric was faded, the brim cracked with age. "Travis?" Lydia's voice came from behind me, small and frightened. "What's happening?" I wanted to tell her I didn't know, wanted to come up with some rational explanation. But as I stood there holding my impossibly aged hat, looking at my impossibly deteriorated truck, I finally admitted to myself what I'd been trying to deny since I'd smelled that first hint of smoke. Something was very, very wrong with this place, and we were right in the middle of it. I pulled out my phone again. Still no signal. The truck's radio was dead. When I turned the key, nothing happened. The battery was completely drained. "We need to walk out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The main highway is about 12 miles south. If we push hard, we can make it before dark." 12 miles? Lydia looked ready to cry. "I don't know if I can walk that far. I'm so tired." "You can rest once we're out of here. Right now, we need to move." I grabbed my emergency pack from the truck. Thankfully, the supplies inside seemed unaffected by whatever had happened to the vehicle itself. I had water, energy bars, a first aid kit, and a spare radio. I tried the radio immediately, but got nothing but static on all channels. We started walking south on the main Forest Service road, maintaining a quick pace despite Lydia's exhaustion. I kept checking my watch obsessively, watching the minutes tick by. 10:47 a.m., then 10:48, then 10:49, then 10:47 a.m. again. I stopped walking and stared at my watch. The second hand was moving normally, sweeping around the face, but the minute hand kept jumping back. Time was going backward. "Lydia," I said carefully, "what time do you have?" She pulled out her phone, looked at it, and her face went pale. "It says 10:47, but that can't be right. We've been walking for at least 15 minutes. We stood there on that empty forest road, watching our devices count time that wasn't passing properly, and I realized something terrifying. Whatever had happened to my truck, the aging, the deterioration, the decay of months or years in a matter of hours, it was happening to time itself in this place. We weren't just lost in the woods. We were lost in something else entirely. "The mine," Lydia said suddenly. "That's what's doing this. It has to be." "What mine? You mentioned it before, but I don't know what you're talking about." "The Redemption Mine. It's marked on the old survey maps. My supervisor told me about it last week, said it was one of the deepest mines in the Black Hills. They dug down almost half a mile before they abandoned it in the 50s. There were accidents. People died down there." I thought about the metallic scraping sounds, the voice whispering my name, the tents arranged in that strange triangle. "Where is it?" "Exactly." Lydia pulled out a folded map from her jacket pocket. "It should be here, about 2 miles northeast of where we found each other." I looked at the map, then at my GPS. The coordinates matched up with the area where I'd found that clearing with the tents and the carved message, which meant whatever was happening, whatever force was playing with time and making impossible things happen, it was centered on that mine. And then I understood what the carved word meant, what the tally marks were counting. Wait, not a command, a status. Someone, or something, had been waiting. 23 days marked out with careful scratches in stone, waiting for someone to come, waiting to be found. And we'd found it. "We're not going south," I said. Lydia looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "What? Why not?" "Because time isn't working right here. We could walk for hours and never leave this area. The only way out is to go to the source, to the mine." "Are you insane? That's where all this is coming from." "Exactly. And if we want it to stop, if we want to get home, we need to face it, whatever it is." Lydia started crying then, quiet tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted to volunteer. I just wanted to help protect the forest. I didn't sign up for this." I put a hand on her shoulder. "I know, neither did I. But we're here now, and we need to deal with it. I promise you I'm going to get us out of this. But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with." She wiped her eyes and nodded, though I could see she didn't really believe we'd make it out. Hell, I wasn't sure I believed it either. But sitting on this road watching time loop back on itself wasn't an option. We needed to act. We turned around and started walking northeast, back toward the clearing, back toward that carved message and those empty tents, back toward the redemption mine and whatever was waiting inside. The forest seemed darker now, though the sun was still high overhead. Shadows moved in my peripheral vision, probably just branches swaying in the wind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were something more. Something watching us, following us. When we reached the clearing again, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The tent stood empty, the fire pit still smoldered, and that carved word stared at us from the rock face. But now I could see what I'd missed before. Behind the rock face, partially hidden by vegetation, was a narrow path leading upward. "That wasn't there before," I said. "Are you sure?" I wasn't. Nothing felt certain anymore, but I was sure that the path looked old, worn smooth by decades of footsteps, and it led in the direction of the metallic sounds we'd heard earlier. We followed it up the slope, climbing steadily. The path switchbacked several times, rising through dense forest until we emerged onto a rocky outcropping. And there, carved into the mountainside, was the entrance to the redemption mine. It was larger than I'd expected, a dark mouth in the rock, easily 10 feet high and wide enough to drive a truck through. Old wooden supports framed the entrance, weathered gray but still standing. Someone had hung a chain across the opening with a faded sign attached. "Danger, keep out, unstable mine shaft." But the chain was broken, hanging loose on one side. And the dust around the entrance was disturbed, marked with footprints leading both in and out. Fresh footprints. Lydia grabbed my arm. "Someone's been here. Recently." I pulled out my flashlight and clicked it on, shining the beam into the darkness. The light revealed a tunnel sloping downward, the walls shored up with old timbers and the ceiling lost in shadows. About 30 feet in, the tunnel curved and disappeared from sight, and echoing up from those depths, so faint I almost missed it, came that metallic scraping sound again. Rhythmic. Purposeful. Like someone deep underground, digging toward the surface, or digging something up. "We should go in," I said, though every instinct I had was screaming the opposite. Lydia looked at me like I'd suggested we jump off a cliff. "Are you completely out of your mind?" "Probably. But whatever's doing this, whatever's messing with time and aging my truck and whispering my name, it's down there. And I need to know what it is. Why? Why do you need to know? It was a good question. The smart thing would be to run, to keep trying to find a way out of this time-twisted section of forest, to hope that eventually we'd break free and be able to call for help. But something inside me knew that wouldn't work. Knew that we'd been marked somehow, selected, and the only way forward was down into the darkness. Because it called my name, I finally said. It knew me, and I think it's been waiting for me specifically. Lydia stared at me for a long moment, then let out a shaky laugh. Well, that's just fantastic. I get lost in the woods and end up with the chosen one. Despite everything, I almost smiled. You don't have to come with me. You can wait here and I'm not waiting anywhere alone, she interrupted. If you're going down there, I'm coming too. At least that way if we die together instead of me dying alone up here, wondering what happened to you. That's surprisingly practical. I'm a very practical person, even when I'm terrified out of my mind. I checked my pack one more time. Flashlight, extra batteries, water, first aid kit, my pocket knife, and for some reason I'd thrown in a small pickaxe for trail maintenance. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. We stepped over the broken chain and entered the redemption mine. The temperature dropped immediately, the cool air inside carrying that metallic smell I'd noticed before. Our footsteps echoed on the stone floor, and our flashlight beams swept across walls lined with old pick marks. Someone had carved this tunnel by hand, inch by inch, chasing a vein of gold that had probably run out decades ago. We followed the tunnel as it descended, the slope gentle but steady. After about 50 feet, we reached the first junction, 3 tunnels branching off in different directions. Someone had marked them with faded paint. North Branch, South Branch, and Main Shaft. The scraping sound was louder now, and it was definitely coming from the main shaft. Last chance to turn back, I whispered to Lydia. Already past the last chance about 5 last chances ago, she whispered back. Let's just get this over with. We entered the main shaft tunnel. It was narrower than the entrance, and the wooden supports looked more precarious, some of them sagging under the weight of stone above. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming small pools on the floor. And the walls, there was something odd about the walls. I stopped and shined my light more carefully. The rock face was covered in scratches, not the pick marks from mining, but smaller, more deliberate marks, like tally marks, but thousands of them, covering every surface as far as I could see. Someone was counting, Lydia breathed. But counting what? Days, maybe, or I don't know. We kept moving, and the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber. This must have been a work area. There were old tools scattered around, rusted buckets, broken lanterns, and in the center of the chamber a vertical shaft dropped down into darkness. A wooden platform had been built around it, with a pulley system that had probably been used to lower miners down. The scraping sound was coming from below, echoing up the shaft. I leaned over the edge and shined my light down. The shaft went deep. My flashlight beam couldn't reach the bottom, but I could see something moving down there, something that interrupted the beam with regular motions. Someone was digging. "Hello?" I called down. "This is U.S. Forest Service. Who's down there?" The scraping stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the depths of the shaft, came a voice, a woman's voice, young and clear. "Travis? Travis Monroe?" Lydia's hand found mine, her grip tight with fear. "How do you know my name?" I called back. "Because I'm waiting for you," the voice said. "I've been waiting such a long time. Please, you have to help me. I'm trapped down here." I looked at Lydia. Her face was pale in the flashlight beam, but her expression was firm. She shook her head slightly. "Don't trust it." "Who are you?" I called down. "My name is Sarah Whitmore. I'm a geology student from the university. I came here 3 weeks ago to study the mineral deposits, and I fell. I've been trapped down here ever since. Please, you have to get me out." 3 weeks. 23 tally marks on that rock face above. It fit, but something still felt wrong. "How do you know my name?" I asked again. There was a pause, then, "I saw your ID badge. It fell down here with me. I haven't lost my ID badge." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice came again, it sounded different. Harder. Less human. "I know because I've been watching, waiting, learning. I know everything about you, Travis Monroe. I know about your 6 years in construction. I know about your apartment in Rapid City. I know about the scar on your left knee from when you fell hiking when you were 12. I know about the nightmares you have about your mother's death. I know everything because I've been inside your mind since the moment you entered these woods." I felt ice water flood my veins. Lydia's grip on my hand tightened until it was painful. "What are you?" I managed to ask. "I'm what's left. What remains when everything else is stripped away. This mine went deep, Travis. Deeper than any records show. Deep enough to reach places that should never be reached. And they brought something up, something that learned to wait, learned to call, learned to be patient. What do you want?" "Want? I want what was taken. I want to rise. I want to stop waiting. And you're going to help me." The scraping started again, but faster now, frantic. And from the darkness of the shaft, I began to see light, a pale, sickly phosphorescence that made my eyes water. "We need to leave," Lydia said urgently. "Right now." She was right. We turned and ran back the way we'd come, our flashlights bouncing wildly as we sprinted through the tunnel. Behind us, I could hear something else now, a grinding sound, like stone moving against stone. We burst out of the mine entrance into sunlight that seemed too bright, too normal. I grabbed Lydia and we ran down the path, stumbling in our haste, neither of us daring to look back. We didn't stop running until we reached the clearing with the tents. We collapsed at the edge of the clearing, both of us gasping for breath. My legs were shaking and my heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Lydia was bent over, hands on her knees, trying not to be sick. What the hell was that? She managed to get out between breaths. I shook my head. I didn't have an answer, couldn't have one, because what we'd experienced down in that mine defied any rational explanation. Something was down there. Something that knew me, knew my past, knew things it shouldn't be able to know, and it was trying to get out. I pulled out my radio and tried again. Static. My phone showed no signal, and my watch was still displaying 10:47 a.m. We were still caught in whatever temporal distortion was affecting this area. "We need to think," I said, forcing myself to focus. "That thing down there, it said it wants to rise, that it's been waiting. What if it's been using those campers somehow? Those tents, that fire, what if people have been coming here, going into the mine? And then what? Just disappearing? Maybe. Or maybe they're still down there." Lydia looked at me with horror. "You think there are people trapped in that mine?" "I don't know. But that voice knew about my ID badge falling. What if someone really did fall down there? What if this thing has been collecting people?" I walked over to the nearest tent and looked inside more carefully. There was a backpack in the corner that I hadn't noticed before. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were clothes, a water bottle, some energy bars, and a wallet. I opened the wallet. The driver's license showed a young man, maybe 22, from Colorado. His name was Jake Patterson. The license had expired 2 years ago. "Lydia," I called. "Check the other tents." We searched each tent methodically. Every one of them contained personal belongings: backpacks, sleeping bags, clothes. Each one had identification. 3 different people: Jake Patterson from Colorado, Emily Rodriguez from New Mexico, and Michael Cole from California. Michael Cole. The name rang a bell. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old emails until I found what I was looking for. 6 months ago, there had been a memo about a missing hiker in the Black Hills, a graduate student from California who'd been researching mining history. The search had gone on for 2 weeks before being called off. His name had been Michael Cole. "These people came here looking for the mine," I said slowly. "They were researchers, students, adventurers. And something brought them here. Something called them, just like it called me. But why? What does it want with them, with us?" I thought about what the voice had said, about going deep, about reaching places that should never be reached, about bringing something up. "I think the miners found something," I said. "Back in the 50s, when they were still operating. They dug too deep and hit something, not gold, something else. And I think it's been down there ever since, waiting for someone to let it out." "Let it out? Let what out?" Before I could answer, I heard footsteps behind us. We both spun around. A man was standing at the edge of the clearing. He was old, at least 70, with a weathered face and hands scarred from decades of hard labor. He wore faded jeans and a denim shirt, and he was carrying an old-fashioned kerosene lantern even though it was full daylight. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice rough as gravel. I moved to put myself between him and Lydia. "Who are you?" "Name's Henry Blackwood. I worked this mine back in the day, back before they shut it down." He took a step closer, and I noticed he was wearing boots caked with fresh mud. "I asked you a question. Why are you here?" "I'm a Forest Service ranger. I was investigating reports of illegal camping." "And you found more than you bargained for, didn't you?" Henry's eyes were sharp, intelligent. "You went down there, into the mine. How did you know that?" "Because I can see it on you, the mark. Once it notices you, once it learns your name, you carry it with you." He held up his hand, and I saw that his palm was covered in the same kind of tally marks I'd seen carved into the rock face and the mine walls. Lydia gasped. "What happened to you?" "I was part of the last crew," Henry said. October 1954. We'd been working the deep shaft for about 6 months, following a vein that the company thought would make them rich. We were down almost half a mile when we hit it. Hit what? A chamber. Natural formation, not something we dug. And inside that chamber... He trailed off, his eyes going distant. We found the remains. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Bones and artifacts and things we couldn't identify. The company brought in experts, archaeologists, anthropologists. They said the remains were impossible. Too old. Predating any known human settlement in the Americas by thousands of years. What did they do? What they always do. Covered it up, sealed the chamber, shut down the mine, paid us all to keep quiet. But it was too late by then. We'd already disturbed something, already woken it up. "The voice," I said, "the thing that calls people's names." Henry nodded. "It learned from the bones, from whatever knowledge or memory or essence was trapped down there with them. It learned language, learned patience, learned how to call out to people who might be susceptible. Susceptible to what? Loneliness, isolation, the kind of people who seek out places like this, who want to be alone in the wilderness. It calls to them, draws them here. And once they're here, once they go down into the mine, he shook his head. They don't come back. Not as themselves, anyway. I thought about the voice that had known my name, my history, my nightmares. It gets inside your head, learns everything about you. And then it uses you, wears you like a suit. It's been trying to reach the surface for 70 years, but it needs bodies to do it. Living bodies. It needs people to bring it up from the depths. But why? Lydia asked. What does it want? To be. To exist in this world instead of whatever hell it's been trapped in down there. And every person who goes into that mine, every person who hears their name called, they're one step closer to helping it succeed. I felt sick. Those missing hikers, the ones who own these tents, it has them down there. Yes. And now it has you, too, both of you. The moment you heard your names, the moment it learned who you are, you became part of its plan. There has to be a way to stop it, I said. To break free. Henry's expression was sad. I've been trying for 70 years, son. I'm the only one from my crew who's still alive, and only because I never left. I've been here, watching, waiting, making sure no one gets too close. Those tents, I set them up. Those fires, I lit them, trying to keep people away, trying to warn them off. But it's getting stronger, drawing more people, and eventually, one of them is going to succeed in bringing it up. What happens if they do? Then it spreads, calls to more people, takes more bodies, grows stronger until... He gestured around at the forest. Until there's nothing left but it. We stood there in silence, the weight of what he was saying settling over us like a shroud. I thought about my watch still reading 10:47, about time looping back on itself, about my truck aging decades and hours. The thing in the mine wasn't just trying to escape, it was already changing reality around it, bending the rules of the world to suit its needs. There is one way, Henry said quietly. One way to stop it permanently. How? Collapse the mine. Seal it completely. Trap it so deep that it can never reach the surface, never call to anyone again. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. I've been preparing for this for a long time. Dynamite. Old mining explosives I've kept hidden. Enough to bring down the whole mountainside if it's placed correctly. You want to blow up the mine, I said. I want to finish what should have been done 70 years ago. Lydia grabbed my arm. Travis, if there are people down there, those missing hikers, we can't just seal them in. They're already gone, Henry said bluntly. Their bodies might still be walking around, but whatever was them, it consumed that, fed on it, used it to grow stronger. The kindest thing we can do is make sure no one else suffers the same fate. I wanted to argue, wanted to believe there was another way, a solution that didn't involve potentially burying people alive. But I'd heard that voice in the mine, I'd felt it probing my mind, learning my secrets, wearing my identity like a costume. Whatever was down there, it wasn't something that could be reasoned with or saved. It was something that needed to be destroyed. Show me, I said to Henry. He nodded and led us back up the path to the mine entrance. The chain was still broken, the opening still dark and uninviting. But now I could see what I'd missed before. Henry had been placing charges. Small bundles of dynamite hidden in the rocks around the entrance, wired together with the old cable. I've been waiting for the right time, Henry explained. Needed to be sure the mine was stable enough that the collapse would go deep, but also needed to be sure there were no innocent people nearby who might get caught in the blast. And now, with that thing getting stronger, calling louder, pulling more people in, we're out of time. He started checking the charges, his movements practiced and efficient despite his age. I stood there watching, part of me screaming that this was wrong, that we should try to save the people below. But I knew in my gut that Henry was right. Those people were already lost, and if we didn't act now, Lydia and I would be next. "How do we do this?" I asked. "I've got about 20 minutes of fuse time. We light it, we run, and we don't look back. The blast will trigger a rock slide that should seal the entrance and collapse the first few levels of the mine. With any luck, it'll trap that thing so deep it can never claw its way out." "With any luck," Lydia repeated softly. "That's not very reassuring." "Nothing about this situation is reassuring," Henry said. "But it's the best option we've got." I checked my watch. Still 10:47. Time was still broken here, still caught in whatever loop that thing had created. If we didn't stop it, maybe time would never move forward again. Maybe we'd be trapped in this moment forever, repeating the same actions, hearing our names called over and over until we finally gave in and went down into the dark. "Do it," I said. "Light the fuse." Henry pulled out an old Zippo lighter, flicked it open, and touched the flame to the fuse. It caught immediately, sparking and hissing as it began to burn. "Run," Henry said. We ran. Down the path from the mine, through the clearing with the tents, following the old road south. My pack bounced on my shoulders and my lungs burned, but I didn't slow down. Behind us, I could hear something, a rumbling that seemed to come from deep underground, like the mountain itself was waking up. We'd gone maybe a quarter mile when the explosion hit. The sound was beyond description, a crack that seemed to split the world in half, followed by a roar that went on and on. The ground shook beneath our feet, and I grabbed Lydia to keep her from falling. Trees swayed, branches fell, and birds erupted from the canopy in panicked flocks. And then, silence. We stopped running and turned to look back. A massive dust cloud was rising above the trees, blocking out the sun. Through the haze, I could see that the mountainside where the mine had been was now just a slope of broken rock. The explosion had triggered exactly the kind of collapse Henry had described. Thousands of tons of stone and earth pouring down, sealing the entrance, burying whatever was inside. "Is it over?" Lydia asked, her voice shaking. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because something was wrong. The dust cloud was moving, not settling like it should, but swirling, forming shapes in the air. And through the haze, I could see light. That same sickly phosphorescence we'd seen in the mine shaft, now glowing from somewhere beneath the rubble. "It's not dead," Henry said, appearing beside us. His face was grim. We didn't bury it deep enough. As we watched, the rubble began to shift. Rocks were moving, rolling aside as if something underneath was pushing its way up, and through the gaps, I could see them. Figures, human-shaped but wrong somehow, moving with jerky, unnatural motions. "The missing hikers," I breathed. "What's left of them," Henry corrected. There were 3 of them, climbing out of the rubble. I recognized them from the photos on the IDs I'd found. Jake Patterson, Emily Rodriguez, Michael Cole. But they were wrong. Their eyes glowed with that same phosphorescent light. Their movements were too fluid and too sudden at the same time, and when they opened their mouths, the voice that came out was singular and unified. "You cannot stop what has already begun," they said in perfect unison. "You cannot seal what wishes to be free. We are older than your species. We were here before. We will be here after." "Run!" Henry shouted, and we ran. But this time was different. This time I could hear them behind us, giving chase. Their footsteps were wrong, too fast, too rhythmic, like machines instead of people, and they were calling our names. Travis, Lydia, Henry. The voices surrounded us, coming from all directions. My watch showed 10:47 still, but now the second hand was moving backward. Time was breaking down completely, reality unraveling at the edges. We burst out onto the main Forest Service road where I'd parked my truck. It was still there, still aged and deteriorated, still useless. But beyond it, down the road heading south, I could see something that made my heart leap with desperate hope. The forest ended. Not gradually, not naturally, but in a sharp line, like someone had drawn a boundary. Beyond that line, I could see normal daylight, normal trees, normal reality. "That's the edge," I shouted. "The edge of whatever's affecting this place." We sprinted toward it. The possessed hikers right behind us. I could hear their breathing now, could hear the wet sound of their footsteps, could hear them calling and calling and calling our names in that horrible, unified voice. Lydia stumbled and fell. I grabbed her, hauled her back to her feet, but we'd lost precious seconds. The hikers were only yards behind us now, reaching out with hands that had too many joints, mouths opening too wide. Henry turned around. "Keep going," he shouted at us. "Don't stop." "Henry, no!" But he was already moving, throwing himself at the nearest hiker. They collided and went down in a tangle of limbs. The other two hikers stopped, focusing on Henry instead of us. "Go!" Henry screamed, and his voice was filled with such finality that I knew he wasn't planning to follow. I grabbed Lydia's hand and we ran the last 30 feet to the boundary. As we crossed it, I felt something change, like passing through a membrane, a shift in pressure that made my ears pop. Time snapped back into normal flow with an almost audible click. I spun around, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Henry was on the ground, surrounded by the 3 hikers. They weren't attacking him, they were changing him. That phosphorescent light was flowing into him, through him, and his body was convulsing. His mouth opened, and that terrible, unified voice came out. "Thank you, Henry, for 70 years of service, for leading them here, for being such a faithful—" The explosion cut off the words. Henry must have had one more charge, one final stick of dynamite hidden on his person. He'd detonated it, and the flash of light and sound was so intense I had to look away. When I looked back, there was nothing. Just a crater where Henry and the hikers had been, and that strange boundary line was still there, holding, keeping whatever remained of them trapped on the other side. Lydia was crying silently. I wanted to comfort her, but I was shaking too badly myself. We just stood there, watching the dust settle, watching the boundary shimmer like heat waves, and then, slowly, it began to fade. The line between the affected area and normal reality started to blur, to disappear. Reality was healing itself, knitting back together now that whatever force had been twisting it was diminished. My watch showed 2:37 p.m. Time was moving normally again. "We need to report this," Lydia said, her voice hoarse. "We need to tell someone what happened." I pulled out my phone. Signal bars appeared one by one. The normal world was coming back online. But as I started to dial, I stopped. Who would believe us? What would we even say? That we'd found a mine containing an ancient evil that possessed people and bent reality. That a 70-year-old man had been fighting it in secret since the 50s. That we'd blown up a national forest and buried it along with several missing hikers. They'd think we were insane. Or worse, they'd investigate, send teams into the ruins of the mine and risk waking it up again. "No," I said. "We can't tell anyone. Not the whole truth anyway." "What do we tell them?" I thought for a moment. We tell them we found evidence of illegal camping. We tell them we encountered a dangerous individual, Henry Blackwood, a hermit who'd been living in the woods. We tell them he had explosives, that he threatened us, and that there was an accident that triggered a rock slide. The missing hikers? Their remains were buried in the collapse. Case closed. Lydia looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You want to lie? Cover it up, just like they did in the 50s. I want to protect people from going into those ruins looking for answers they shouldn't find. The mine is sealed. Whatever was down there is trapped. Maybe not forever, but for now, and that's the best we can do. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, we tell them the minimum. But Travis, yeah? If we ever hear about strange things happening in this area again, if people start going missing, or if someone reports hearing voices in the woods, then we come back, I said. And we finish what Henry started. We walked back to the Forest Service Road, past my ruined truck, back toward civilization. Behind us, the dust from the explosion was still settling over the collapsed mine. In a few months, the forest would reclaim the area completely. Trees would grow over the rubble, grass would cover the scars. Nature would hide the evidence of what had happened here. But I'd remember. Both of us would. We'd carry the knowledge like Henry had carried it. A weight, a responsibility, a warning. The redemption mine was sealed. The thing that had been waiting in the depths was trapped. But I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach turn, that it wasn't dead. It was just waiting again. Patient. Learning. Growing stronger in the dark. And someday, maybe not in my lifetime, but someday, someone would disturb those ruins, would dig too deep, would hear their name called from the shadows. And when that happened, I could only hope that they'd be smart enough to run, or brave enough to do what needed to be done. We reached the parking area where this had all started. My truck was here, the real one, untouched by whatever temporal distortion we'd experienced. I checked my phone. 2:45 p.m., Saturday, the same day I'd left. Only a few hours had passed in the real world, though it had felt like days in that twisted pocket of forest. I radioed dispatch, gave them a condensed version of events, requested support teams. Within an hour, the forest would be swarming with rangers and emergency responders. There would be investigations, reports, paperwork. The official story would be written and filed away, and the truth would stay buried with Henry Blackwood in the ruins of the redemption mine. As Lydia and I sat on the tailgate of my truck waiting for help to arrive, she asked me one final question. Do you think it knew? That Henry was working against it all those years? I thought about the voice calling his name at the end, thanking him for 70 years of service, for leading us there. Yeah, I said quietly. I think it knew. I think it had known for a long time. It was just patient enough to wait for the right moment to use him. That's terrifying. Yeah, it is. We sat in silence after that, listening to the forest sounds return to normal. Birds singing, wind in the trees, the ordinary, beautiful sounds of a wilderness that wasn't twisted and broken anymore. But I'd never hear those sounds quite the same way again, because now I knew what could be hiding beneath them, what could be waiting in the deep places, patient and hungry and ancient beyond imagining. I'm still a ranger, still doing the job I love, but I'm more careful now. I pay attention to the quiet places, the abandoned sites, the areas where the maps don't quite match the terrain. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in the backcountry, I think I hear it. There's a moment that happens in every search and rescue operation, a moment when hope starts to curdle into something else. You can feel it in the air, see it in the way people stop making eye contact, hear it in the silences that stretch just a little too long between radio checks. That moment came for us around 2 a.m. on the third night, standing in the rain beside a ranger truck that shouldn't have been empty. My name is Jenna Klein, and I've been a law enforcement officer with the U.S. Forest Service for 4 years now. Before that, I spent 6 years with the Rapid City Police Department, working everything from traffic stops to domestic violence calls. I thought I'd seen it all, thought I understood what fear looked like, what desperation sounded like. But nothing in my training prepared me for what happened during the Deer Creek Patrol. It started on a Tuesday morning in late October. The kind of morning where frost clings to everything and your breath makes clouds in the air. I was in the ranger station going over incident reports when Marcus Reed knocked on my door. Marcus is our wildlife technician, 38 years old, former military, the kind of guy who can track a deer through 3 miles of rough terrain and tell you what it ate for breakfast. He's quiet, competent, and one of the few people in the station I genuinely trust to have my back in a bad situation. "Got a minute?" he asked, holding a tablet. "Always. What's up?" He sat down across from my desk and pulled up a map on the tablet. "I've been reviewing the trail camera data from the Deer Creek sector. Something's off." I leaned forward. Trail cameras are motion-activated devices we place throughout the forest to monitor wildlife populations and illegal activity. They're reliable, solar-powered, and they've helped us catch everything from poachers to illegal dumpers. "Off how?" I asked. Marcus swiped through a series of images. The first few showed normal wildlife. A doe and her fawn, a black bear, some turkey vultures. Then he stopped on an image that made me pause. It showed a section of forest I recognized, the old access road near Deer Creek, about 15 miles northwest of the station. But instead of wildlife, the camera had captured a vehicle. A ranger truck, to be specific. And it was parked at an odd angle, nose pointed into the trees like someone had driven off the road in a hurry. "When was this taken?" I asked. 3 days ago, 11:47 p.m. I zoomed in on the image. The truck's headlights were on, illuminating the trees ahead. I could just make out the license plate. It was one of ours, assigned to Ranger David Hollis. "Has anyone seen Hollis since then?" Marcus shook his head. "That's what concerns me. I checked the duty logs. Hollis signed out for a routine patrol on Sunday evening. He was supposed to check in Monday morning. Never did." A cold feeling settled into my stomach. And no one noticed he was missing for 3 days? He lives alone about 20 miles from here. Never married, keeps to himself. His patrol area is remote. Sometimes he camps out overnight if he's doing extended monitoring. It's not unusual for him to be out of contact for a day or two. But 3 days is unusual. 3 days is cause for concern. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. "Get your gear. We're heading out to Deer Creek." Marcus nodded and left to collect his equipment. I radioed dispatch to inform them we were investigating a possible missing ranger situation, then checked my own gear. Radio, GPS, first aid kit, emergency supplies, sidearm. Standard protocol for a backcountry patrol. But as I was loading my truck, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be anything but standard. The drive to Deer Creek took about 40 minutes on progressively worse roads. The last 5 miles were barely maintained, just 2 ruts through the forest that required 4-wheel drive and careful navigation. Fall had been dry, so at least we didn't have to worry about mud, but the cold had already killed most of the vegetation, leaving everything brown and skeletal. Marcus rode in the passenger seat, studying his tablet. I pulled up Hollis's patrol logs from the past month. He's been spending a lot of time in this sector. Any indication why? According to his notes, he was investigating reports of illegal hunting. A couple of local hunters claimed they'd seen someone spotlighting deer at night. That's poaching, obviously, so Hollis was trying to catch them in the act. Spotlighting is a common poaching technique. You shine a bright light at night to freeze deer in place, then shoot them while they're stunned. It's illegal, dangerous, and unfortunately more common than most people realize. Did he find anything? Not according to his reports, but his last few entries are sparse. Just GPS coordinates and times, no detailed notes. That was unusual. Hollis was known for being thorough, maybe too thorough. His reports were usually filled with detailed observations, weather conditions, wildlife sightings. The fact that his recent entries were abbreviated suggested something had changed. We reached the location where the trail camera had captured the image of Hollis's truck. I pulled over and we got out, immediately scanning the area. The truck was still there. It was parked about 20 feet off the road, nose pointed toward a dense section of pine forest. The headlights were off now. The battery had probably died, but otherwise the vehicle looked exactly as it had in the camera image. Marcus and I approached carefully, hands near our weapons. The forest was quiet except for the wind moving through bare branches. "Hollis?" I called out. "David Hollis, this is Ranger Klein. If you can hear me, please respond." No answer. Just the wind and the sound of our boots crunching on frost-covered ground. I reached the driver's side door and peered through the window. Empty. The keys were still in the ignition, turned to the accessory position. The radio was on, its screen glowing faintly in the dim morning light. "Doors unlocked," Marcus said from the passenger side. I opened the driver's door and immediately noticed several things. First, Hollis's ranger hat was on the seat. He never went anywhere without it. Second, his duty belt was hanging from the steering wheel, complete with his sidearm, radio, and other equipment. Third, there was a thermos of coffee in the cup holder, still sealed. "He left in a hurry," Marcus observed, coming around to stand beside me. "Or he was planning to come right back," I countered. But neither explanation felt right. No ranger abandons their weapon and radio, not unless something is seriously wrong. I checked the radio, pressing the transmit button. Static crackled through the speaker, but the device was functional. I switched to our main channel and keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Klein. We've located Ranger Hollis's vehicle at the Deer Creek patrol area. Vehicle is unoccupied, but keys are in the ignition. No sign of Ranger Hollis. Requesting additional units for search and rescue operations." The dispatcher's voice came back, professional but concerned. "Copy that, Ranger Klein. I'm showing your position. Be advised, we have limited personnel available. Can you begin a preliminary search of the immediate area?" "Affirmative. We'll conduct a quarter-mile radius search and report back." I turned to Marcus. "Check the truck bed and surrounding area for any signs of struggle or tracks. I'm going to listen to his radio logs." Most Ranger vehicles are equipped with digital recorders that automatically log all radio transmissions. It's a safety feature. If something goes wrong, there's a record of the Ranger's last known communications. I climbed into the driver's seat and accessed the recorder. The most recent entry was time-stamped at 11:43 p.m. on Sunday night, about 15 minutes before the trail camera captured the image of the parked truck. I pressed play. Hollis's voice came through the speaker, calm and professional. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Hollis. I'm at the north end of Deer Creek, investigating possible spotlighting activity. I can see lights moving through the trees about half a mile east of my position. Requesting backup if available." There was a pause, then the dispatcher's response. "Copy that, Ranger Hollis. All units are currently assigned. Can you maintain visual observation without engaging?" "Affirmative." "I'm going to move closer on foot to get a better look. We'll maintain radio contact." Another pause, then Hollis's voice again. But something had changed in his tone. The professional calm was still there, but underneath it I could hear something else. Confusion, maybe. Or concern. "Dispatch, this is Hollis. I'm approximately 300 yards from the light sources now. I can see two distinct lights moving parallel to each other through the forest. But they're not moving like someone carrying a spotlight. The pattern is wrong. Can you describe what you're seeing, Ranger Hollis? The lights are moving too smoothly, too steadily. No bobbing motion like you'd get from someone walking. And they're high, maybe 15-20 feet off the ground. Could be someone in a tree stand, but that doesn't make sense for spotlighting. Are they vehicle headlights? There was a long pause before Hollis responded. When he did, his voice was quieter, more uncertain. Negative. There's no road access in that direction. It's thick forest, rough terrain. No way to get a vehicle in there. And the lights aren't pointed at the ground like headlights would be. They're just moving. Steady, deliberate. Do you want me to send additional units once they're available? Another pause. This one stretched longer. Hollis, please respond. When Hollis spoke again, he sounded different. Distracted. Yeah, sorry, the lights just stopped moving. They're stationary now, maybe 200 yards ahead. I'm going to approach on foot to investigate. Ranger Hollis, recommend you maintain your current position until backup arrives. Copy that. But I need to at least identify what I'm looking at. Could be a legitimate camping situation, could be our poachers. I'll keep the radio on and provide updates. Understood. Please exercise caution. Then came the sound of Hollis moving. Footsteps, branches brushing against clothing, his breathing slightly elevated from exertion. This went on for about 2 minutes. Then he spoke again, and this time I could definitely hear unease in his voice. Dispatch, this is Hollis. I'm about 100 yards from the light sources now. I can see them clearly through the trees. They're not flashlights or headlights. They're too bright, too white, and they're not attached to anything I can see. They're just there, floating. Floating? That's the only way I can describe it. Two lights, roughly circular, maybe 3 feet in diameter each. Bright white with a slight blue tinge. They're positioned about 20 feet apart and about 15 feet off the ground. Completely stationary now. Are they making any sound? No sound, no movement, just light. I could hear the confusion in his voice, the effort to describe something that didn't make logical sense. Hollis, if you cannot identify the source, recommend you return to your vehicle and wait for backup. Yeah, I think, wait. The word was sharp, sudden, then silence. Ranger Hollis? More silence, then barely audible. Hollis whispered into the radio. They moved. Both lights. They turned toward me. Turned? Hollis, are you saying these lights are directed at you? I don't know what I'm saying. But they moved together, in unison, like they were tracking me, and now they're coming closer. Ranger Hollis, return to your vehicle immediately. That's an order. There's no one carrying them. Dispatch, do you understand what I'm telling you? These lights aren't attached to anything. They're just moving through the forest on their own. Hollis, return to your vehicle now. I could hear him running then, boots pounding on hard ground, branches snapping. His breathing was ragged, panicked. The professional calm was completely gone. They're following me! Hollis gasped into the radio. They're right behind me! I can see my truck, I'm almost... And then the recording cut off. Not with static, not with a scream, not with a crash. It just ended mid-sentence, as if someone had reached over and switched off the radio. I sat in the driver's seat of Hollis's truck, staring at the radio, replaying those final seconds in my mind. They're right behind me. I can see my truck, but he never made it back. The keys were in the ignition, his equipment was here, but Hollis himself was gone. Marcus appeared at the driver's door, holding something in his gloved hand. Found tracks, he said. leading east into the forest. They're Hollis's boots. I can match the tread pattern to standard-issue ranger boots. How many sets of tracks? Just one, his. No sign of anyone else? No vehicle tracks, nothing. But Jenna... He paused, looking uncomfortable. What is it? The tracks stop after about 50 yards. They just end. Middle of a clearing, nothing around. Like he just vanished. I got out of the truck and followed Marcus into the forest. The tracks were clear in the frost-covered ground, boot prints pressing deep, spaced far apart indicating Hollis had been running. I followed them through the trees, watching as they led us steadily east, exactly in the direction Hollis had described seeing the lights. And then, just as Marcus had said, they stopped. We were standing in a small clearing, maybe 30 feet across. The last two boot prints were visible at the edge of the clearing, pointing toward the center. But beyond them, nothing. No more tracks, no signs of a struggle, no disturbed vegetation. The ground was undisturbed, as if Hollis had simply ceased to exist mid-stride. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus said quietly. I circled the clearing, searching for any explanation. A log he might have stepped on to avoid leaving tracks. A rocky area where prints wouldn't show. Anything. But the clearing was uniform. Flat ground covered in frost and dead leaves, perfect for holding prints. Maybe he doubled back? I suggested, though I didn't believe it even as I said it. Marcus shook his head. Look at the tracks coming in, the spacing, the depth. He was running flat out. Nobody pulls a tactical retreat while sprinting. And even if he did, we'd see the tracks where he changed direction. I pulled out my radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Klein. We found tracks belonging to Ranger Hollis leading approximately 50 yards east from his vehicle. The tracks terminate in a clearing with no apparent explanation. Requesting full search and rescue deployment." "Copy that, Ranger Klein. I'm activating our SAR protocols. Expect additional units within 2 hours." 2 hours. In normal circumstances, that would be fine. But standing in that clearing, looking at boot prints that ended in impossibility, I had a feeling that 2 hours might be too late. "We should document everything," I said to Marcus. "Photos, measurements, GPS coordinates. And then we need to figure out what Hollis was chasing." Marcus pulled out his camera and started photographing the tracks and the clearing. I walked the perimeter, studying the forest. The trees were mostly ponderosa pine and black spruce, thick enough to block most direct sunlight, but not so dense that you couldn't see between them. Visibility was good, maybe 100 yards in most directions, which meant that if there had been lights moving through here 3 nights ago, they would have been visible from a significant distance. And if they were as bright as Hollis described, they would have been impossible to miss. So, what were they? "Jenna," Marcus called from the far side of the clearing. "Come look at this." I walked over to where he was crouching, examining something on the ground. At first, I didn't see what had caught his attention. Then he pointed, and I understood. There was a pattern in the frost. Circular impressions, maybe 3 feet in diameter, spaced about 20 feet apart. The frost inside the circles was darker, as if it had been melted and refrozen, and the pattern extended into the forest, leading away from the clearing. 2 circles, Marcus said softly, 20 feet apart, just like Hollis described. "These could be from anything," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Someone could have set something down here. Buckets, barrels, anything round. In the middle of the forest? 15 miles from the nearest road? And why would the frost pattern suggest heat?" He was right, of course. These marks were too specific, too deliberate to be random, and they lined up perfectly with Hollis's description of 2 lights, 3 feet in diameter, 20 feet apart. We followed the circular impressions deeper into the forest. They appeared every 15 to 20 feet, Always the same size, always the same distance apart. The pattern was consistent, methodical, like something walking with a measured stride, or something that had been searching. After about 200 yards, the impression stopped. We'd reached another small clearing, this one slightly larger than the first. And in the center of this clearing we found something that made my blood run cold. Hollis's flashlight. Still turned on, lying in the dead leaves. The beam was weak. The batteries were nearly dead, but it was unmistakably his. I recognized the scratches on the casing, the custom grip tape he'd added. Marcus and I looked at each other, and I saw my own fear reflected in his eyes. A ranger doesn't drop their flashlight while running. It's your lifeline in the dark, your primary navigation tool. You'd hang on to it even if you were bleeding out. Unless something made you drop it. Unless something made it impossible to hold on. I picked up the flashlight carefully, using a glove to preserve any potential evidence. As I lifted it, something else caught my eye. A small, torn piece of fabric caught on a nearby branch. It was dark green, the same color as our ranger uniforms. "He came through here," Marcus said. "Running, probably trying to escape whatever he saw." He dropped his flashlight, kept going. Question is, where did he go after this? We searched the area carefully, looking for more tracks, more signs of passage. But the ground here was rockier, less likely to hold prints. After 30 minutes of searching, we found nothing else. I radioed our findings to dispatch, describing the circular impressions and the abandoned flashlight. The dispatcher's voice remained professional, but I could hear the concern underneath. "Additional units are en route. ETA 90 minutes. Please maintain your position and continue documenting any evidence." "Copy that. Dispatch, can you pull weather reports for Sunday night? I want to know if there were any atmospheric conditions that might explain unusual lights." "Stand by." Marcus and I sat on a fallen log while we waited, both of us lost in thought. The forest around us was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no rustling of small animals, just the wind moving through the trees and our own breathing. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Marcus finally asked. "Depends. Are you thinking this whole situation makes no sense?" "That, and also that Hollis's description of those lights doesn't match anything natural I've ever encountered. Not car headlights, not flashlights, not any kind of atmospheric phenomenon I know about." "What about drones?" I suggested. "Someone could have been using drones with lights attached. That would explain the floating appearance, the smooth movement." Marcus considered this. "Maybe, but drones make noise. Hollis was military. He would have recognized the sound of drone motors. And the lights he described were huge, 3 feet in diameter. That would require industrial-sized drones. Why would anyone be flying something like that through the forest in the middle of the night? Illegal activity. Spotlighting deer with drones, maybe. It's the kind of thing someone would try. Flying 20 feet off the ground through dense forest at night? That's a recipe for crashing. And it still doesn't explain where Hollis went." The radio crackled. "Ranger Klein, this is dispatch. Weather report for Sunday night shows clear skies, no precipitation, temperature around 40 degrees, no unusual atmospheric conditions reported. However, I'm seeing something interesting in the historical reports." "Go ahead." "We've had 3 reports over the past 2 months from local residents claiming to see unusual lights in the Deer Creek area. All reports were filed as possible illegal spotlighting, but none of them resulted in any arrests or confirmed sightings by our rangers." 3 reports in 2 months, I repeated. "That's above average for this sector." "Affirmative. And according to our records, Ranger Hollis responded to all 3 reports. His patrol notes indicate he investigated but found no evidence of illegal activity." I exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Dispatch, can you send me copies of those reports? Transmitting now." My phone buzzed as the files came through. I opened them and started reading. The first report was from a local hunter who'd been camping near Deer Creek. He claimed to have seen 2 bright lights moving through the trees around midnight. He'd assumed it was someone spotlighting, but thought it was strange that the lights were so high off the ground. The second report was from a couple who'd been driving on a Forest Service road about 5 miles from where we were now. They'd seen lights in the distance, moving parallel to the road. When they'd stopped to investigate, the lights had turned toward them, and they'd driven away in fear. The third report was the most detailed. A solo backpacker had been camping near Deer Creek when he'd woken in the middle of the night to see 2 lights approaching his campsite. He described them as impossibly bright, like miniature suns, and said they'd circled his tent several times before moving away. He'd packed up and hiked out at first light, filing the report from a ranger station 20 miles away. All 3 reports mentioned 2 lights. All 3 described unusual movement patterns, and all 3 had been investigated by David Hollis, who'd found no evidence of illegal activity. Because whatever he was looking for wasn't illegal spotlighting. It was something else entirely. "Marcus," I said slowly, "what if Hollis wasn't investigating poachers? What if he was tracking something else? Something that's been showing up in this area for months. Like what?" "I don't know, but I think he figured it out. I think on Sunday night he finally got close enough to see what was causing these lights. And whatever it was..." I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. We both understood the implication. The sound of engines broke the silence. Vehicles approaching on the Forest Service road. The search and rescue team was arriving early, which meant they'd pulled people from other assignments. This was officially being treated as a serious emergency. Within 15 minutes, the clearing where we'd found Hollis's truck had been transformed into a command center. There were 8 rangers, including our supervisor Dale Hutchins, plus a K-9 unit and 2 EMTs. Everyone moved with practiced efficiency, but I could see the concern on their faces. One of our own was missing, and the circumstances were beyond unusual. Dale pulled Marcus and me aside. "Walk me through everything you found." We spent 20 minutes giving him a detailed briefing. The truck, the radio logs, the tracks that ended in nothing, the circular impressions, the abandoned flashlight. Dale listened without interrupting, his face growing more grave with each detail. When we finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been doing this job for 23 years. Never heard anything quite like this. What's our next move?" I asked. "We conduct a grid search of the entire area. The K-9 unit will track Hollis's scent from the truck. We'll have teams covering every direction. If he's out here injured or disoriented, we'll find him." He paused. "And if something else happened, we'll find evidence of that too." But there was doubt in his voice. He'd seen the same things we had. He knew this situation defied normal explanation. The search began in earnest. Teams of 2 rangers each spread out in a grid pattern, maintaining radio contact, documenting everything they found. The K-9, a German shepherd named Rex, picked up Hollis's scent immediately and pulled his handler east into the forest, following the same path Marcus and I had taken earlier. We watched as Rex led his handler to the first clearing where the tracks had stopped. The dog circled the area, whining in confusion. Then he picked up the scent again and pulled toward the second clearing where we'd found the flashlight. But when they reached that clearing, Rex stopped completely. He sat down and refused to go any further, despite his handler's encouragement. "He's lost the scent," the handler called over the radio. "Or something else is wrong. He won't track." I'd seen search dogs refuse to work before, usually when they were exhausted or injured. But Rex looked healthy and alert. He just wouldn't move beyond that clearing. He kept looking into the forest to the east, ears back, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The dog was afraid. By late afternoon, we'd searched a 3-mile radius around Hollis's truck and found nothing but the evidence Marcus and I had already documented. No additional tracks, no signs of struggle, no blood, no torn clothing beyond that single piece of fabric. It was as if David Hollis had simply vanished into thin air. Dale called a meeting at the command center as the sun started to sink toward the western ridges. The temperature was dropping fast, and we all knew that if Hollis was out there injured, his chances of surviving another night were slim. "We're going to continue the search through the night," Dale announced. "I'm bringing in additional personnel from the state police and organizing volunteer groups. This is now a full-scale search and rescue operation." One of the younger rangers raised his hand. "Sir, what about the lights? The ones Hollis reported seeing?" Dale's jaw tightened. "Until we have evidence to the contrary, we're treating those as spotlights used by poachers. If anyone sees unusual lights during the search, report your position immediately and do not approach alone. Work in teams of 3 minimum." It was a good answer, professional and measured, but it didn't address the real question everyone was thinking. What if the lights Hollis saw weren't from poachers? What if they were something else? As the meeting broke up, Marcus pulled me aside. "I want to go back to that second clearing, the one where Rex refused to track." "Why?" "Because something spooked that dog. Rex is trained to work through all kinds of conditions. Weather, wildlife, difficult terrain. I've never seen him refuse to track like that. You think there's something there we missed? I think there's something there the dog sensed that we couldn't, and I want to know what it was." I should have told him no. Should have insisted we follow protocol and stay with the main search teams. But I'd worked with Marcus long enough to trust his instincts. If he thought there was something worth investigating, he was probably right. "Okay," I said. "But we tell Dale where we're going. We take a radio check every 15 minutes, and we're back before full dark. Agreed?" "Agreed." We informed Dale of our plan, grabbed fresh batteries for our radios and flashlights, and headed back into the forest. The sun was already behind the mountains, casting long shadows through the trees. We had maybe 90 minutes of usable light left. The walk to the second clearing took about 20 minutes. As we approached, I found myself moving more cautiously, paying attention to the forest around us in a way I hadn't earlier. The silence we'd noticed before was even more pronounced now. No birds, no squirrels, no insects, just the wind and our footsteps. When we reached the clearing, Marcus pulled out a handheld thermal imaging camera from his pack. It was a tool we used for spotting wildlife at night, but it could also detect heat signatures from living things. If something was here recently, something that left those circular impressions, there might still be residual heat, he explained. He swept the camera across the clearing, studying the screen. At first, nothing appeared beyond the ambient temperature of the ground and trees. Then he stopped, focusing on one area. "There," he said, pointing. "Look at this." I moved closer to see the screen. In the thermal image, 2 faint, circular spots glowed slightly warmer than the surrounding ground. They were in the exact location of the circular impressions we'd found earlier. "Heat signature," Marcus confirmed. "Very faint, but it's there. Whatever created those impressions was warm, and the heat is still detectable 3 days later. What kind of heat source leaves a signature that long? Nothing natural I know of. The ground temperature should have equalized within hours, but it's like whatever was there was extremely hot enough to alter the soil composition." I knelt down and examined one of the circular impressions more closely. In the fading light, I could see something I'd missed before. A slight discoloration in the soil. It wasn't burned exactly, but it looked different. Crystallized, almost like glass. "Marcus, shine your light here," He did, and we both stared at what the beam revealed. The soil inside the circular impression had fused together, creating a rough, glassy surface. It was the kind of effect you'd get from extreme heat, the kind of heat that could melt sand into glass. What the hell could create this kind of heat signature? I asked. Marcus shook his head slowly. Industrial equipment, maybe. A welding torch. Some kind of chemical reaction. But none of those explanations make sense for something moving through the forest at night. A thought occurred to me. One I didn't want to voice but couldn't ignore. Hollis said the lights were bright white with a blue tinge, and they were floating 15 to 20 feet off the ground. What if they weren't just lights? What if they were generating heat too? Enough heat to leave marks like this? You're suggesting what exactly? Some kind of experimental technology? I'm suggesting we don't know what we're dealing with. And whatever it is, it was powerful enough to leave permanent marks on the ground. We spent another 30 minutes in the clearing documenting everything with photos and taking soil samples. The sun was nearly gone now, the forest darkening rapidly. We were about to head back when Marcus's radio crackled. All units, this is dispatch. We have a report of lights spotted approximately 4 miles northeast of the command center. 2 bright lights moving through the forest. Volunteer search team is requesting backup. I felt ice water flood my veins. Marcus and I looked at each other and I could see my own fear reflected in his eyes. That's less than 2 miles from here, Marcus said quietly. I grabbed my radio. Dispatch, this is Ranger Klein. Marcus Reed and I are responding. What's the exact location? The dispatcher read off coordinates. I punched them into my GPS. The location was northeast of our position, in a section of forest between Deer Creek and an old mining road. We're 15 minutes out, I radioed back. Tell the volunteer team to maintain visual contact but do not approach. We're en route. Marcus and I moved fast through the darkening forest, our flashlights cutting paths through the gloom. The terrain was rough, rocky slopes and dense undergrowth that grabbed at our clothes and tried to trip us. But we maintained our pace, driven by the knowledge that someone might be in danger, and by the need to see these lights for ourselves. We'd covered about a mile when my radio crackled again. This time, the voice was panicked, barely coherent. They're coming toward us. The lights are moving toward us. We're getting out of here. Negative, I shouted into the radio. Maintain your position. We're almost there. But there was no response, just the sound of people running, crashing through brush and then silence. Damn it, Marcus breathed. We pushed harder, running now despite the obstacles. My lungs burned, and branches whipped against my face, but I didn't slow down. Behind us, I could hear other search teams calling in, converging on the coordinates. But Marcus and I were closest. We burst into a clearing and found ourselves facing something I'd never expected to see. 2 lights. They were exactly as Hollis had described. Bright white with a blue tinge, roughly circular, maybe 3 feet in diameter each. They hung in the air about 15 feet off the ground, positioned maybe 20 feet apart. And they were moving, slowly and deliberately, sweeping back and forth across the clearing like searchlights. But there was nothing holding them up. No drones, no cables, no structure of any kind. Just 2 impossibly bright lights, floating in midair, searching. Marcus grabbed my arm, pulling me back into the cover of the trees. We watched in stunned silence as the lights continued their methodical sweep of the clearing. When the beams passed over the spot where we were hiding, I felt something I'd never experienced before. A deep, visceral wrongness, like my body was reacting to something it recognized as fundamentally unnatural. And the heat, even from 30 feet away, I could feel the heat radiating from those lights. It was intense, uncomfortable, like standing too close to a bonfire. We need to document this. Marcus whispered, pulling out his camera. But as soon as he raised it, both lights stopped moving. They hung perfectly still for a moment. Then, with a speed that defied physics, they rotated toward us. We weren't just in the beam now. We were the focus. Both lights were aimed directly at our position, and the heat intensified dramatically. I could feel my skin starting to burn, could smell my hair singeing. "Run!" I screamed. We ran. Behind us, I could hear something else now, a sound like nothing I'd ever encountered. It was high-pitched and pulsing, almost like machinery, but with an organic quality that made my teeth ache. The lights were following us, moving through the forest with impossible agility, weaving between trees without slowing. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The lights were maybe 50 feet behind us, keeping perfect pace. And where they passed, the trees were smoking, bark charring from the heat. "Split up!" Marcus shouted. "They can't follow both of us." It went against every instinct and every bit of training I had, but he was right. I veered left, Marcus went right, and for a terrible moment I thought the lights would split up too, pursuing us both. But they didn't. They stayed on my trail, both of them together, and I heard Marcus's footsteps fading into the distance. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, jumping logs and dodging trees, my flashlight bouncing wildly as I sprinted through the forest. The lights stayed behind me, steady and relentless, and then, without warning, they stopped. I didn't realize it immediately. I was too focused on running, on not tripping, on not dying. But after another 50 yards, I slowed and looked back. The lights were gone. I stood there gasping for breath, surrounded by darkness, my flashlight the only source of illumination. The forest was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like waiting. My radio crackled. "Jenna? Jenna, are you there?" Marcus's voice had never sounded so good. "I'm here. Where are you?" "About a quarter-mile north of where we split up. The lights didn't follow me, did they? They followed me for a bit, then stopped. I don't see them now. We need to get back to the command center. Report this to Dale." "Agreed. What's your position?" He read off his GPS coordinates. We were about half a mile apart, separated by rough terrain. "I'll meet you back at the command center," he said. "Don't stop moving, and keep your radio on." "Copy that." I started walking, moving as quickly as I dared in the darkness. My hands were shaking, partly from exertion, partly from fear. What I'd just experienced defied everything I knew about the natural world. Lights don't float in midair. They don't generate that kind of heat. They don't track people through the forest like predators. But that's exactly what these things had done. And David Hollis had encountered them alone 3 nights ago. No wonder he'd panicked. No wonder he'd run. The question was, had he gotten away? I'd been walking for about 10 minutes when I heard something that made me freeze. Voices. Human voices, coming from somewhere ahead and to the right. I turned off my flashlight and moved quietly toward the sound. As I got closer, I could make out words. Saw them clear as day. 2 lights, just like that ranger described. Came right at us before we ran. "Did you get any photos?" "Phone died." Just like that, full battery to nothing in about 3 seconds. Same thing happened to Jim's phone. That's not normal. Nothing about this is normal, Dave. I recognized the voices. Members of the volunteer search team that had first spotted the lights. I was about to reveal myself when I heard something else. A sound that made my blood turn to ice. That high-pitched, pulsing sound. The same one I'd heard when the lights were chasing me. And it was getting closer. "Run!" I shouted, breaking from cover. "Get away from here, now!" The volunteers spun toward me, startled. But they could hear it too. That terrible sound, growing louder with each passing second. We all ran together, crashing through the forest in blind panic. The lights appeared behind us, emerging from the trees like twin stars. They were moving faster now, cutting between the volunteers and me, hurting us, separating us. I saw one volunteer, a man in his 50s, stumble and fall. Before anyone could help him, both lights swung toward him, their beams intensifying. The man screamed, a sound of pure agony, and I could see his clothes starting to smoke. "Get down!" I yelled, dropping to the ground myself. The lights swept over us, the heat unbearable. I could feel my jacket starting to melt, could smell burnt hair and fabric, but I didn't move, didn't run. I just pressed myself against the cold ground and prayed the lights would pass. And they did. After what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, the heat diminished. I looked up to see the lights moving away, heading north through the forest. They'd lost interest in us, or found something more interesting. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the man who'd fallen. He was conscious but badly burned, his face and hands showing first and second-degree burns. The other volunteers were gathering around, some injured, all traumatized. "We need medical attention here," I radioed dispatch. "Multiple burn victims, requesting immediate EMT support." While we waited for help, I examined the ground where the lights had passed. Sure enough, there were those circular impressions again, the soil fused and glassy. Whatever these things were, they were leaving a trail that led north, toward Deer Creek, toward the deepest, most remote section of the Black Hills National Forest, toward whatever was calling them home. Within 20 minutes, the area was swarming with rangers and EMTs. The burned volunteer, his name was Carl Johnson, was stabilized and evacuated to the nearest hospital. The others were treated for minor burns and shock, and through it all I gave my statement to Dale, describing what I'd seen. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. When I finished, he said, "We're pulling everyone back to the command center. No more search operations tonight. Not until we understand what we're dealing with." "Dale, those lights went north. If they're connected to Hollis's disappearance, that's exactly why we're pulling back. I'm not losing anyone else." He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. "Jenna, in 23 years I've dealt with bears, mountain lions, wildfires, flash floods. Natural dangers I can understand and prepare for. But this? I have no idea what this is or how to protect my people from it. So what do? We regroup. We bring in specialists, scientists, maybe military if necessary, and we figure out what's happening before anyone else gets hurt." It was the right call, the smart call. But as we walked back to the command center, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. That whatever those lights were, whatever they wanted, they were building towards something. A purpose, a goal, and David Hollis had somehow gotten in their way. Back at the command center, the atmosphere had changed completely. The organized efficiency from earlier had been replaced by barely controlled chaos. Rangers were comparing stories, volunteers were demanding answers, and the EMTs were treating more burn victims than anyone had expected. Marcus found me near one of the vehicles, cleaning soot off my jacket. "You okay?" "Relatively. You?" "Uninjured, but thoroughly confused. I've been thinking about what we saw. And those lights are searching for something. The way they moved, the pattern they followed. It wasn't random. They were tracking, scanning, like they were looking for something specific." I thought about how the lights had followed me, how they'd separated the volunteers, how they'd seemed to focus on certain people while ignoring others. What if they're looking for someone specific? Like Hollis? Or whoever Hollis was investigating. Remember the original reports? People seeing lights in this area for months? What if those lights were searching all along, And what if Hollis got too close to whatever they were looking for? Marcus pulled out his tablet and opened the map showing all the reported light sightings over the past 2 months. When he overlaid them, a pattern emerged. All the sightings were in a roughly circular area about 8 miles in diameter, centered on a location northeast of Deer Creek. "Look at this," he said, zooming in on the center point. "According to the topographical data, that's one of the deepest valleys in this sector. No roads, no trails, minimal human access. If someone wanted to hide in the Black Hills, that's where they'd go. Or if someone wanted to set up an illegal operation. What kind of operation generates technology like what we saw tonight?" It was a good question, one I didn't have an answer for. But one thing was becoming clear. This wasn't about poaching or illegal camping. This was something bigger, something that had been operating in these woods for at least 2 months. And 3 days ago, David Hollis had discovered it. Dale called another meeting as midnight approached. Everyone was exhausted, traumatized, running on adrenaline and coffee. But we all gathered, needing answers even if none were available. "I've been in contact with the state police and federal authorities," Dale announced. "Given the unusual nature of tonight's events, they're sending an investigative team. They'll arrive tomorrow morning." "What kind of team?" someone asked. "They're calling it a joint task force, state police, FBI, and some specialists from the Department of Defense." Department of Defense. That got everyone's attention. "Why DOD?" I asked. Dale hesitated. "They didn't provide details, but reading between the lines, I think they've encountered something similar before. Or at least they think they know what we're dealing with." Marcus and I exchanged glances. If the military was involved, that suggested this was either a classified technology or something the government didn't want the public to know about. "In the meantime," Dale continued, "I want all personnel to stay within the command center perimeter tonight. No one goes into the forest alone. If you see any unusual lights or experience any strange phenomena, report it immediately. Is that clear?" Everyone nodded. The meeting broke up, and rangers started settling in for a long, uncomfortable night. Some tried to sleep in their vehicles. Others sat around a fire barrel talking in hushed tones. I found myself walking the perimeter, unable to rest. Around 2 a.m., Marcus joined me. "Can't sleep either." "Too wired. Keep thinking about Hollis, about what might have happened to him." "You think he's still alive?" "I don't know. Those lights, they didn't seem interested in killing us. They were aggressive, sure, but it felt more like they were hurting us, driving us away. Or testing us, seeing how we'd react." That was an even more unsettling thought. If those things are some kind of advanced technology, there's an operator somewhere. Someone controlling them. "Or something," Marcus said quietly. I looked at him. "You can't seriously be suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying we shouldn't make assumptions. We saw floating lights that generate extreme heat, move with impossible agility, and track people through dense forest at night. Whatever explanation we eventually get, it's going to challenge our understanding of what's possible." We stood in silence for a while, watching the dark forest beyond the perimeter. Somewhere out there, David Hollis was either dead or hiding, or worse. And somewhere out there, those lights were still searching. As if summoned by my thoughts, I saw it, a faint glow between the trees, maybe half a mile distant. Not the bright white of the lights we'd encountered, but a softer, amber glow, like a campfire. "Marcus," I said quietly, "do you see that?" He followed my gaze. "Yeah, could be one of the search teams. We pulled everyone back hours ago." I pulled out my radio and switched to the main channel. "All units, this is Ranger Klein. I'm seeing an amber light source approximately half a mile northeast of the command center. Can anyone confirm they have personnel in that area? Responses came back quickly. Every team was accounted for, all within the perimeter, which meant the light we were seeing was coming from someone or something else. Dale appeared beside us, looking exhausted but alert. What are we looking at? Unknown light source. Could be the search target. Could be our mystery operators. Could be Hollis, Marcus added. That possibility hung in the air. If Hollis was out there, if he'd somehow survived 3 days in the forest, he might have made a fire. It would be a risk. Smoke and light could attract attention, but it would also keep him warm and signal rescuers. Dale made a decision. I'm not sending anyone out there tonight, but at first light, we go in force. 6 rangers, minimum, full equipment, and we find out who or what is making that fire. And if it's Hollis, then we bring him home. We watched the distant glow for another hour, but it didn't move or change. Eventually, fatigue won out, and I retreated to my vehicle to catch a few hours of sleep. But even as I drifted off, I couldn't stop thinking about those lights, about the heat they'd generated, about the way they'd tracked us through the forest, and about what it meant that the government was sending a Department of Defense team to investigate. Because that suggested one terrifying possibility. Whatever we'd encountered tonight, it wasn't new. It was known, classified, part of some program or project that operated in the shadows. And if that was true, then David Hollis hadn't just stumbled onto illegal poachers. He'd stumbled onto a secret that someone, or something, would kill to protect. There's something about caves that gets into your head. Maybe it's the darkness. Not the kind you get at night where your eyes adjust and you can still make out shapes, but true darkness. The complete absence of light that presses against your eyeballs like a physical thing. Or maybe it's the silence. People think caves are quiet, but that's not quite right. Caves have their own sounds. Water dripping, rocks settling, wind moving through passages that haven't seen sunlight in millennia. It's the weight of those sounds, the way they echo and distort until you can't tell if what you're hearing is real or just your mind filling in the gaps. My name is Derek Vaughn, and I've been a ranger with the U.S. Forest Service for 6 years. Before that, I spent 4 years working as a wilderness guide in Colorado, taking tourists on hiking expeditions and teaching basic survival skills. I thought I knew what isolation felt like, what it meant to be alone in nature. But nothing prepared me for Wind Cave. Wind Cave isn't the famous one. That's Wind Cave National Park, about 40 miles south of where I work. This Wind Cave is smaller, unmarked on most maps, tucked into a limestone ridge in the Black Hills National Forest. It got its name from the constant airflow that moves through its passages, a low whistle that can be heard from 100 yards away when conditions are right. The locals know about it, but tourists rarely find it, which is how the Forest Service likes it. Caves are dangerous, not just from the obvious hazards like unstable rock or getting lost, but from what we call cave psychology. People go into caves expecting an adventure and come out traumatized by the darkness, the confined spaces, the feeling of being buried alive. We've had to rescue more than a few amateur spelunkers who went into caves unprepared and suffered panic attacks deep underground. That's why we conduct quarterly inspections of known cave systems in our jurisdiction. We check for structural issues, clear out any debris that might pose a hazard, and document any changes in the cave environment. It's routine work, usually boring, always necessary. The story starts on a Thursday in early November. The first snow had fallen 2 days earlier, a wet, heavy snow that clung to the pine trees and turned the forest roads into muddy nightmares. I was supposed to conduct the quarterly inspection of Wind Cave with my supervisor, Holly Anders, who'd been with the Forest Service for 12 years and knew these woods better than anyone I'd ever met. Holly was waiting by her truck when I pulled into the staging area around 8 a.m. She was in her mid-40s with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical braid and the kind of weathered face you get from spending most of your life outdoors. She was drinking coffee from a thermos and studying a topographical map spread across her hood. "Morning," I called, grabbing my gear from the truck bed. "Derek, you bring the extra batteries?" "Got them right here. Plus, backup flashlights, rope, first aid kit, and the survey equipment." "Good. Weather report says we've got clear skies until around 3 p.m., then a front moving in. I want to be in and out by noon." I nodded, shouldering my pack. Wind Cave was a relatively simple system. One main passage running about 300 yards into the ridge, with a few smaller side chambers, and a couple of vertical shafts that required climbing equipment to access. We'd be fine as long as we didn't encounter any collapses or flooding. The hike to the cave entrance took about 30 minutes through snow-covered forest. The temperature was hovering just below freezing, and our breath made clouds in the cold air. Around us, the forest was quiet. That deep winter quiet that comes when most animals are hibernating and the birds have migrated south. When we reached the ridge, Holly stopped and pointed. "There it is." The cave entrance was a dark opening in the limestone, maybe 6 feet high and 4 feet wide. It looked like a wound in the rock face, and as we approached, I could hear the wind moving through it, that distinctive whistle that gave the cave its name. Today it sounded different, though. Hollow, almost mournful. "You hear that?" Holly asked, cocking her head. "The wind?" "Yeah, it's louder than usual." "No, not the wind. Listen." I stopped and listened more carefully. Underneath the whistle of moving air, there was something else. A sound so faint I almost missed it. It was rhythmic, repetitive, like, "Is that a voice?" I asked. Holly's expression was troubled. "Could be an echo from the highway. Sound carries weird through these passages sometimes." But we were 15 miles from the nearest highway, and the sound wasn't random traffic noise. It had a pattern, a rhythm, like someone speaking. We stood at the entrance for a long moment, both of us straining to hear. The sound would fade, then come back, then fade again. Definitely a voice, definitely human, but the words were indistinct, distorted by distance and the acoustics of the cave. "Could be someone in trouble," I said, already pulling out my flashlight. Holly nodded grimly. "Or could be teenagers playing around in there. Either way, we need to check it out." She keyed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Anders. We're at Wind Cave entrance for routine inspection. We're hearing what sounds like human voices inside. Going to investigate. We'll report back in 30 minutes. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Ranger Anders. Exercise caution." We turned on our flashlights and entered the cave. The temperature drop was immediate, from just below freezing outside to maybe 40 degrees inside. The cave maintained a relatively stable temperature year-round, which was why it attracted so much wildlife in winter. We'd found evidence of bears using it for hibernation, and bats roosted in the deeper chambers. The entrance passage was smooth limestone, worn by thousands of years of water flow. Our boots echoed on the stone floor, and our lights revealed the familiar formations. Stalactites hanging from the ceiling, glowstone cascading down the walls. Everything looked normal, exactly as it had during our last inspection 3 months ago. But that voice was still there, clearer now that we were inside. It was coming from deeper in the cave, echoing through the main passage. And now I could almost make out words. "Help! Anyone! Please!" Holly and I exchanged glances. Someone was definitely in trouble. "Hello?" Holly called out, her voice bouncing off the cave walls. This is U.S. Forest Service. Can you hear us? Where are you?" No response. Just that same repeating pattern. "Help, anyone, please." We moved faster now, following the main passage as it descended into the ridge. Our lights swept across familiar landmarks. The cathedral chamber, where the ceiling opened up to 20 feet. The needle room with its dense cluster of thin stalactites. The narrow squeeze where you had to turn sideways to get through. The voice was getting louder, but something about it was wrong. It wasn't getting clearer. It should have been getting clearer as we got closer to the source. Instead, it stayed just as distorted, just as distant, no matter how far we went. After about 10 minutes of walking, we reached the main chamber, a roughly circular space about 40 feet across and 15 feet high. This was usually where we set up our equipment to take readings of air quality, temperature, and humidity. It was also where the main passage split into 3 smaller tunnels, each leading to different sections of the cave. And sitting in the center of the chamber, placed carefully on a flat rock, was a small recording device. Holly and I stopped simultaneously, our lights fixed on the object. It was a digital voice recorder, the kind you could buy at any electronics store. And it was playing, "Help, anyone, please." I moved closer, my hand instinctively going to the pepper spray on my belt. The recorder was modern, probably no more than a few years old. Its LED was blinking red, indicating it was actively playing. Holly knelt beside it, examining it without touching. "This is fresh. No dust, no moisture damage. It's been placed here recently." Why would someone leave a recorder playing in a cave? That's a very good question. She pulled a glove from her pack and carefully picked up the device. The voice kept repeating its message, and now that we could hear it clearly, I realized it wasn't distorted by the cave acoustics. It had been recorded that way, deliberately made to sound distant and desperate. Holly pressed the stop button. The silence that followed was absolute, and somehow worse than the voice had been. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see the timestamp on the recorder's display. The message had been set to loop continuously, and according to the battery indicator, the device had been running for approximately 18 hours. "There's more on here," Holly said, checking the file list. "Multiple recordings." She pressed play on the next file. This time, the voice was different. Clearer, no longer pleading. A man's voice, young, maybe early 20s. "If you're hearing this, you've come to investigate. That's good. That means you care about what happens in these caves. That means you'll want to know the truth." There was a pause, and I could hear breathing on the recording. Heavy, nervous breathing. "My name is Tyler Morrison. I'm a graduate student at the University of South Dakota, studying geology. I've been exploring Wind Cave for the past 3 weeks as part of my thesis research, and I've found something. Something that shouldn't be here. Something that the Forest Service needs to know about." Another pause. When the voice continued, it was quieter, more hesitant. 3 days ago, I was in the eastern branch of the cave system, mapping a passage that wasn't on any official surveys. About 400 yards in, I found a chamber, a big one, maybe 60 feet across. And the ceiling was wrong. Holly and I looked at each other. The eastern branch was one of the less explored sections of Wind Cave, requiring technical climbing to access. We'd documented its entrance, but never fully surveyed the passages beyond. The rock formations on the ceiling weren't natural, Tyler's voice continued. They were carved, shaped, made by human hands. And they were old, really old, possibly thousands of years old. There were symbols, pictographs, things that looked like writing but in no language I recognized. My skin prickled. Ancient rock art wasn't unheard of in the Black Hills. The Dakota and other indigenous peoples had been in this region for millennia. but finding undocumented carvings this deep in a cave system would be a major archaeological discovery. I documented everything. Took photos, made sketches, logged GPS coordinates. But when I tried to leave, I got disoriented. The passages in that section are complex, and I think I took a wrong turn. I ended up in a part of the cave I didn't recognize. There was a long pause, and I heard what sounded like someone drinking water. That's when I heard it. A sound coming from deeper in the cave. Not wind, not water. Movement, like something big shifting position. And then I saw the lights. Holly's hand tightened on the recorder. Lights in a cave where there shouldn't be any light. Small, flickering, like candle flames. But they were moving in a pattern, like they were being carried by someone, or something. I called out, thinking maybe it was other explorers. But the lights stopped, and then they started moving toward me. I could hear the fear in Tyler's voice now, even through the recording. I ran. I don't know how long or how far. I just ran until I found a passage I recognized and made it back to the main chamber. That was 2 days ago. I haven't been back since. But I can't stop thinking about what I saw. About those carvings, about the lights. Someone needs to investigate properly, with the right equipment and expertise. The recording paused, then Tyler's voice came back, urgent now. I'm leaving this recorder here with instructions, hoping someone from the Forest Service will find it during routine inspections. I've included the GPS coordinates of the carved chamber and detailed notes on how to access it. But whoever goes in there needs to be careful, because I don't think I was alone in that cave, and I don't think whatever else is down there wants to be found. There was a click, and the recording ended. Holly and I stood in the main chamber, our flashlights creating intersecting beams in the darkness. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Holly said, "Play the next file." I reached over and pressed the button. This time, it was a different voice. Female, older, professional. This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the South Dakota Archaeological Survey. I'm recording this on November 8th at approximately 2:30 p.m. I received information about possible ancient rock carvings in Wind Cave and came to investigate. I've been in the cave for approximately 3 hours and have located the chamber described by Mr. Morrison. The carvings are indeed present and appear to be genuine ancient artwork, possibly ancestral Puebloan or older. There was excitement in her voice, the kind that comes from a significant discovery. The pictographs show complex geometric patterns and what appear to be astronomical observations. There are also symbols I don't recognize, possibly representing spiritual or ceremonial significance. This find could reshape our understanding of ancient presence in the Black Hills region. A pause. I'm now proceeding deeper into the eastern branch to see if there are additional chambers with similar artwork. I've marked my path with reflective tape and am maintaining careful documentation. I should be back at the cave entrance within 2 hours. Another pause. Longer this time. Wait, I'm hearing something. A sound like movement, coming from one of the side passages. Hello? Is someone there? Silence. Then Dr. Mitchell's voice again, quieter. That's strange. The sound stopped when I called out. Could be bats disturbed by my light, or maybe cave cricket activity. I'm going to investigate. The recording went silent for almost a minute. Then Dr. Mitchell's voice came back, tight with controlled fear. I'm seeing lights, multiple light sources in a passage that should be completely dark. They're not natural, too steady, too bright. Someone else is down here. I'm going to... The recording cut off abruptly. Holly immediately grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Anders. We have a potential emergency situation at Wind Cave. We've discovered recordings indicating at least 2 people may have encountered problems in the cave system. Requesting immediate support, we need a cave rescue team and possibly law enforcement." The dispatcher's voice came back, concerned. "Copy that, Ranger Anders. Can you provide more details?" Holly gave a concise summary of what we'd found. The recordings, the mentions of mysterious lights, the abrupt cutoff of Dr. Mitchell's recording. As she talked, I examined the recorder more carefully. There was one more file. I waited until Holly finished with dispatch before pressing play. This time, there was no voice, just sound. Wind moving through passages, water dripping. And then, so faint I almost missed it. Breathing. Someone breathing slowly, quietly, like they were trying not to be heard. This went on for about 30 seconds, then a whisper, barely audible. "Look up." The recording ended. I played it again, making sure I'd heard correctly. Look up, 2 words. Clear and deliberate. Holly had heard it too. We both tilted our heads back, shining our flashlights at the chamber ceiling. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the expected limestone formations, some stalactites, areas of flowstone. But then Holly's light caught something that made me freeze. Scratches in the rock. Fresh scratches, bright and new against the darker stone. They formed letters, crude but readable, carved into the limestone about 12 feet above the cave floor. 3 went in. My blood went cold. "Holly, I see it." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "We need to wait for backup." Those recordings mentioned lights. Tyler Morrison saw them, Der Mitchell saw them. What if someone is using this cave for illegal activities? What if they're down here right now? All the more reason to wait. We're not equipped for confrontation in a cave environment. She was right, of course. Protocol dictated that we secure the area and wait for a proper cave rescue team and law enforcement support. But something about those scratched words bothered me. 3 went in, past tense, like whoever wrote it was counting. "How long until backup arrives?" I asked. Holly checked her radio. "At least 90 minutes. The nearest cave rescue team is in Rapid City." 90 minutes. I thought about Tyler Morrison's panicked voice, about Dr. Mitchell's recording cutting off mid-sentence, about those scratched words on the ceiling. "We should at least check the eastern branch entrance," I said. "Make sure no one's in immediate danger." Holly considered this, her light playing across the 3 tunnel entrances that branched off from the main chamber. The eastern branch was the rightmost tunnel, the one that required climbing equipment to fully explore. "Just to the entrance," she finally agreed. "We document what we can see, then we come back here and wait for support. No heroics, Derek. If we see anything suspicious, we retreat immediately." Agreed. We made our way to the eastern branch entrance. It was a narrow opening about 4 feet high, requiring us to crouch to enter. The passage beyond descended at a steep angle, and about 20 yards in, we could see where the floor dropped away into a vertical shaft. Holly pulled out her climbing harness and rope. "This is as far as we can go without proper equipment." I shined my light down the shaft. It was about 15 feet deep, dropping into a wider passage below. And on the walls of that passage, I could see something that made my breath catch. Reflective tape. Exactly like the kind Dr. Mitchell had mentioned using to mark her path. "She made it this far," I said. "The tape looks recent." Holly was studying the shaft walls, her light revealing several anchor points where climbing equipment could be secured. "These anchors are new too. Someone's been doing serious exploration down there." A sound echoed up from the passage below. We both froze, listening. It came again, a scraping sound like metal on rock. Then silence. "Hello?" Holly called down. "This is U.S. Forest Service. Is anyone down there? Do you need assistance?" No response. The silence stretched out, broken only by the ever-present whistle of wind through the cave passages. Then, faintly, so faintly I almost thought I imagined it, a voice came from below. "Look up." The same words from the recording, the same whisper. Holly and I immediately pointed our lights at the ceiling of the passage we were standing in. At first, I didn't see anything. Then Holly's light caught it. More scratches, more letters, fresher than the ones in the main chamber, like they'd been carved within the last few hours. "They know you're here." "We're leaving," Holly said, her voice firm. "Right now." We backed away from the shaft entrance, moving as quickly as we could while keeping our lights pointed forward. Behind us, I could hear something. Movement in the darkness, the sound of rock shifting. We'd made it maybe 10 yards when my light caught something that stopped me cold. There, on the passage wall at shoulder height, was a handprint. A bloody handprint, still wet, the red standing out stark against the pale limestone. "Holly, I see it. Keep moving." We reached the main chamber and Holly immediately grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Anders. We have evidence of injuries in the cave system. Possible blood trail. We're exiting immediately and setting up a perimeter at the cave entrance." "Copy that, Ranger Anders. Rescue team is en route. ETA 45 minutes. We started back toward the entrance, moving fast, but carefully. The cave passages that had seemed so familiar on the way in now felt sinister, threatening. Every shadow could hide danger, every sound could be a threat. We were halfway to the entrance when all our flashlights went out simultaneously. Not the batteries dying, that would have given us warning. Gradual dimming. This was instant, total darkness, the kind of darkness that exists only deep underground, where not a single photon of light penetrates. "Derek?" Holly's voice came from somewhere to my right. "I'm here. What happened?" "I don't know. Battery failure? But all at once?" I tried my backup flashlight. Nothing. Pulled out my phone. The screen wouldn't turn on. It was like something had drained all our electronic devices simultaneously. "Holly, my phone's dead too. Same here. Stay calm. We're about 100 yards from the entrance. We can feel our way along the walls." She was right. We'd come in this way. We knew the path. We just had to move slowly and carefully, keeping contact with the cave wall. We started forward, one hand on the stone, moving inch by inch. The darkness was absolute, disorienting. I kept thinking I saw lights in the distance, but when I looked directly at them, they disappeared. Probably my brain trying to make sense of the sensory deprivation. And then I heard it. A sound that made every hair on my body stand up. Footsteps. Multiple footsteps, echoing through the cave passages, coming from behind us, from deeper in the cave. "Holly, tell me you hear that." "I hear it. Keep moving. Don't stop." The footsteps were getting closer, moving faster than we could in the darkness. And now I could see lights. Real lights this time, not hallucinations. 3 lights, bright and steady, approaching from the direction of the main chamber. "Run!" Holly shouted. We ran blind through the darkness, hands stretched out in front of us, praying we wouldn't hit a wall or fall into a pit. Behind us, those lights were getting closer and I could hear voices now. Not words, just sounds. Low, rhythmic sounds that might have been chanting. I slammed into something, Holly, who'd stopped suddenly. "The entrance!" she gasped. "I can see daylight!" And she was right. About 30 yards ahead, I could see a gray rectangle, the cave entrance, showing the overcast sky beyond. We ran toward it, the lights behind us getting closer, those strange voices getting louder. We burst out of the cave entrance into cold November air and didn't stop running until we'd reached the tree line 50 yards away. Only then did we turn back to look at the cave. The entrance was empty. No lights, no followers, no sound except the wind whistling through the opening. Holly pulled out her radio. Miraculously, it was working again. Dispatch, this is Ranger Anders. We've exited Wind Cave. We encountered something in there. Multiple individuals with lights, possible hostile intent, requesting immediate law enforcement support. The dispatcher's voice crackled back, concerned. Are you injured? Negative, but we need... She stopped, staring at something over my shoulder. I turned and saw what had caught her attention. Smoke, rising from somewhere deeper in the forest, maybe a quarter-mile from our position. And not the thin smoke of a campfire. This was thick, black smoke, the kind that comes from burning structures or vehicles. Dispatch, Holly continued. We're also seeing smoke approximately a quarter-mile northeast of our position. Possible structure fire. Copy that. Fire department is being notified. Rescue team ETA is now 20 minutes. Stay where you are and maintain visual on the cave entrance. We waited in tense silence, watching the cave entrance and the rising smoke in the distance. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what we'd experienced. The recordings, the scratched messages, the bloody handprint, and those lights, those voices, pursuing us through the darkness. After about 10 minutes, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Holly, look at the cave entrance. She followed my pointing finger. There, just visible in the shadows of the opening, were footprints in the thin layer of snow that had drifted into the entrance passage. Our footprints from when we'd gone in, but there was a third set. Footprints leading out of the cave into the forest. Fresh footprints that hadn't been there when we'd entered. And they were headed in the direction of that smoke. The rescue team arrived in a convoy of vehicles. 3 ranger trucks, 2 state police cruisers, and a specialized cave rescue van. The lead rescuer was a woman named Captain Lisa Brennan, a veteran who'd been doing cave rescue for 15 years. She took one look at the footprints leading from the cave and immediately called for additional support. Those prints are fresh, she said, examining them with a professional eye. Maybe 30 minutes old. Single individual, adult size, moving with purpose. Not wandering, not confused. This person knows where they're going. Holly and I gave her a complete briefing. The recordings, the messages carved into the rock, our encounter with the lights, the electronic failure. To her credit, Captain Brennan didn't dismiss any of it. We've had reports of strange activity in cave systems throughout the region over the past few months, she said. Lights where there shouldn't be any, equipment failures, people reporting feeling watched. Your experience fits the pattern. What pattern? I asked. She hesitated, exchanging glances with one of the state police officers. Look, this is going to sound strange, but we think someone's been living in the cave systems. Multiple someones, actually. We've found evidence of semi-permanent camps in at least 3 different cave systems in the Black Hills over the past year. Living in caves, in this climate. Not just living, operating. We've found equipment, generators, computers, communication devices. Someone's been using these caves as a base for something. For what? That's what we're trying to figure out. The FBI's involved now, but they're not sharing much information with us. All we know is that it's connected to several missing persons cases and possibly some kind of illegal research operation. Missing persons cases. I thought about Tyler Morrison and Dr. Mitchell, about those recordings that had ended so abruptly. The smoke, Holly said. We need to check on that smoke. Captain Brennan nodded. Already have a team heading that way, but I want you 2 to stay here and walk me through exactly where you encountered the lights in the cave. For the next hour, we coordinated with the rescue team. They suited up in full cave gear, helmets with mounted lights, climbing equipment, communication systems. Captain Brennan led a 5-person team into Wind Cave while we monitored from outside. They found the recorder exactly where we'd left it. They found the scratched messages on the ceiling. They found the bloody handprint. But when they reached the eastern branch and descended into the lower passage, they found something else. "Anders, Vaughn, you need to hear this." Captain Brennan's voice crackled over the radio. Holly keyed the mic. "Go ahead." "We're in the lower passage. There's a chamber here, about 60 feet across, exactly like the recording described, and there are carvings on the ceiling, ancient pictographs, hundreds of them. This is a significant archaeological site. What about the lights? Any sign of other people?" There was a pause. "Negative on the lights, but we found something else. Evidence of recent occupation. Sleeping bags, food supplies, battery packs, and equipment, scientific equipment. Looks like someone's been conducting research down here." "Research into what?" "That's the strange part. There's monitoring equipment set up throughout the chamber. Cameras, motion sensors, audio recording devices, all pointed at the ceiling, at the carvings, like someone was studying them or watching them." A chill ran down my spine. "Are the cameras still active?" "Negative. Everything's been powered down, but not recently. Dust patterns suggest this equipment has been inactive for at least a few days." Holly and I exchanged glances. Whatever operation had been running in Wind Cave, it had been shut down before we arrived. But those lights we'd seen, those voices, someone had still been down there. A ranger approached us from the direction of the smoke. "We found the source," he said, his face grim. "You're going to want to see this." We hiked through the forest following a rough path that led northeast from the cave. The smoke was still visible, though it had thinned considerably. After about 15 minutes, we reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a small structure, more of a shelter than a building, constructed from tarps and plywood. It was burning, the flames already dying down to smoldering embers. Fire department had arrived and was hosing down the remains. But that's not what made me stop in my tracks. Arranged in a circle around the burning shelter were 7 wooden stakes driven into the ground. And attached to each stake with a wire was a paper printout, protected in a plastic sleeve. The flames hadn't reached them yet. Holly walked up to the nearest stake and examined the printout. Her face went pale. "Derek, these are photographs. From inside the cave." I moved closer and looked. The printout showed a photograph of the carved chamber, the ceiling with its ancient pictographs clearly visible. But something was wrong with the image. There were shadows in the photograph, shadows that didn't match the light sources, shadows that looked almost like figures hovering near the ceiling. Each stake had a different photograph, all taken in the cave, all showing similar anomalies. Shadows, shapes, things that shouldn't be there. And at the bottom of each photograph, handwritten in red ink, were 3 words. "They are watching." "This is getting too weird," I muttered. Holly was already photographing the scene with her phone. "We need to document all of this before the fire destroys the evidence." We spent the next 30 minutes working with the fire department and state police to preserve the scene. The shelter's contents were mostly destroyed, but we recovered some items from the edges, more photography equipment, camping supplies, and a laptop that was badly heat damaged but might be salvageable. And we found something else, a journal protected in a fireproof box that had been partially buried near the shelter. Holly opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with handwritten notes and sketches. The first entry was dated 3 months earlier. Day 1. Successfully established base camp near Wind Cave. Initial surveys confirm presence of undocumented chambers in Eastern Branch. Ancient pictographs visible, but need better lighting for detailed study. Team is excited. This could be the discovery of the decade. Team. So, there were multiple people involved. Holly flipped through the pages, reading entries aloud. Day 12. Strange phenomenon observed last night. Cameras captured unexplained light anomalies in the carved chamber. Motion sensors triggered multiple times, but no physical presence detected on visual cameras. Dr. Mitchell suggests checking for bioluminescent organisms. Dr. Mitchell, the archaeologist from the recording. Day 23. Equipment failures becoming more frequent. Batteries draining faster than normal. Electronic devices experiencing interference. Tyler thinks it might be electromagnetic activity from mineral deposits in the cave walls. I'm not so sure. Tyler Morrison, the graduate student. Day 47. Something is wrong. Very wrong. The lights we've been documenting, they're not natural. They move with purpose, with intelligence. Last night, they formed a pattern on the ceiling that matched the pictographs, like they were communicating. The team is scared. Dr. Mitchell wants to leave, but Tyler insists we need more data. Holly's voice was getting quieter as she read, the implications of the words sinking in. Day 53. Tyler went into the cave alone last night. Said he wanted to make direct contact with the lights. We haven't seen him since. Dr. Mitchell and I searched for 6 hours but found no trace. It's like he just vanished. We're shutting down the project. Tomorrow, we'll notify the authorities. Day 54. Dr. Mitchell is gone. I woke up this morning and she was just gone. Her gear is still here, her truck is still here, but she's nowhere to be found. I found her recording device in the main chamber of the cave. She must have gone back in alone during the night. I tried to follow her, but the lights came. So many lights. They surrounded me, herded me back to the entrance, and I heard voices. Not human voices. Something else. I'm leaving this journal here and getting out. If anyone finds this, stay away from Wind Cave. Whatever is in there, it's not natural, it's not safe, and it's been here a very, very long time. The journal ended there. No signature, no name. Just a final, desperate warning. Holly closed the journal and looked at me. We need to get that rescue team out of the cave. Now. She was reaching for her radio when Captain Brennan's voice came through, urgent and panicked. All units, we have a situation. The team in the lower passage, they're reporting lights, multiple light sources moving toward their position. They're attempting to withdraw, but static crackled through the radio. Then silence. Captain Brennan, please respond, Holly said into the radio. Brennan, do you copy? More static. Then a voice, but not Brennan's. It was distorted, wrong, like multiple voices speaking in unison. Look up. Holly and I ran back toward the cave along with every law enforcement officer and ranger on site. We reached the entrance just as the rescue team came stumbling out, some of them supporting others who could barely walk. Captain Brennan was in the lead, her face sheet white, her hands shaking. Get everyone away from the entrance, she gasped. Now. We helped evacuate the team to a safe distance. 2 of the rescuers had to be treated for shock, and 1 had burns on his hands, not from fire, but from touching cave walls that had suddenly become scalding hot. What happened down there? Holly asked, once Brennan had caught her breath. The lights, Brennan said, her voice still unsteady. They came from everywhere. Not from flashlights or lanterns. These were sources of light that didn't have any physical form. They just existed. Bright white spheres. Dozens of them, filling the passages. Did they attack you? Not exactly. They surrounded us, blocked our exit, and then she paused, struggling to find words. Then they showed us things. Images projected onto the cave walls. Pictures of the ancient carvings, but animated, moving, like we were watching a film. And in those images we saw what this place used to be. What do you mean? Brennan looked at me with haunted eyes. Thousands of years ago, this wasn't just a cave. It was a temple, a sacred site. The pictographs aren't just art. They're warnings. Warnings about what lives in the deep places of the earth, about what happens when you disturb it. One of the other rescuers, a young man who looked like he was about to be sick, spoke up. The carvings showed figures, human-like but wrong, living in the caves, coming out at night, taking people. That's what the pictographs were warning about, and those lights, the lights are them, Brennan finished. Or what's left of them. The ancient people who carved those warnings sealed something in this cave. Sealed it with ritual and stone and faith, and we broke the seal. We didn't break anything, Holly protested. We've been inspecting this cave for years, but they did. Brennan pointed at the smoldering remains of the shelter. Tyler Morrison and his team. They didn't just study the carvings, they tried to interact with them. Tried to make contact with whatever the lights are. And in doing so, they woke something that should have stayed sleeping. The implications of what she was saying were staggering. But as I looked back at the cave entrance, at the darkness beyond, I couldn't deny what we'd experienced. The lights, the voices, the way our electronics had failed, the missing researchers. What happened to Tyler and Dr. Mitchell? I asked quietly. Brennan shook her head. I don't know. But in that chamber, on the walls beneath the carvings, we found more messages. Recent ones. Written in something that looked like charcoal. What did they say? We're still here. We're always here. And we're waiting. As the sun set behind the black hills, casting long shadows across the snow, we established a perimeter around Wind Cave. The state police had called in the FBI, who arrived with a team of specialists whose credentials none of them would discuss. They set up equipment around the cave entrance, sensors, cameras, and other devices I didn't recognize. One of the FBI agents, a woman who introduced herself only as Director Hayes, gathered all of us for a briefing. What you've experienced today is classified, she began without preamble. You will not discuss it with anyone outside of official channels. You will not post about it on social media. You will not mention it to friends or family. Is that understood? We all nodded, too shaken to argue. Good. Now, here's what you need to know. Wind Cave is not the first site where we've encountered this phenomenon. Over the past 5 years, we've documented similar occurrences in cave systems across North America. Unexplained lights, electronic interference, missing persons, and in some cases, evidence of ancient warnings about whatever exists in these deep places. You're saying this is real? Holly asked. Not hallucinations, not mass hysteria, but actual phenomena? We're saying we don't know what it is, Director Hayes replied. But it's consistent, it's documented, and it's dangerous. 7 people have gone missing in connection with these sites. 3 others have been found, but were changed, psychologically damaged beyond repair. What's the government's official position? I asked. Officially, these caves are being closed for geological safety concerns. Unofficially, we're studying the phenomenon and trying to understand it. The ancient peoples who created those pictographs knew something we're only beginning to discover, that there are things in the deep places of the earth that we don't understand, things that maybe we're not meant to understand. She paused, looking at each of us in turn. Tyler Morrison and Dr. Sarah Mitchell are still classified as missing persons, but based on the patterns we've seen in other cases, we don't expect to find them. Not alive, not as themselves. What does that mean? Holly demanded. It means that whatever exists in these caves, it doesn't kill people. It takes them, absorbs them, and occasionally it sends something back wearing their face. We've encountered 2 such cases. Both times, the individuals returned claiming to have been lost and disoriented. But they weren't the same people. They spoke differently, moved differently, and they knew things they couldn't possibly know. Details about classified research, locations of undiscovered archaeological sites, scientific principles that hadn't been published yet. The implications were terrifying. You're saying something is learning from the people it takes? We're saying we have evidence that suggests a non-human intelligence exists in deep cave systems, and it has been present for thousands of years. The ancient peoples knew about it. They warned about it. They sealed it away. And in our arrogance, we broke those seals. Director Hayes gestured to her team, who began unpacking more equipment from their vehicles. Wind Cave is now a federal investigation site. No one enters or exits without authorization. The Forest Service will maintain an exterior perimeter, but all interior operations are now under federal jurisdiction. As the FBI team set up their equipment, Holly pulled me aside. "Do you believe all this?" she asked quietly. "Ancient intelligences in caves? People being absorbed and replaced?" I thought about the lights I'd seen, the voices I'd heard, the way our electronics had failed. I thought about those photographs with their impossible shadows and that journal entry warning about things that weren't natural. "I believe something is down there," I said finally. Something that scared Tyler Morrison and Dr. Mitchell enough that they tried to warn people away. Something that has been there long enough to be part of the ancient people's mythology. But is it supernatural, or is there a rational explanation? Does it matter? Either way, it's dangerous. Either way, people have died or disappeared. And either way, we're not equipped to deal with it. Over the next week, Wind Cave became the center of an extensive federal operation. The FBI brought in geologists, archaeologists, physicists, and specialists from organizations I'd never heard of. They set up a base camp a safe distance from the cave entrance and conducted round-the-clock monitoring. And every night, we saw the lights. They would emerge from the cave entrance around midnight, moving in slow, purposeful patterns through the forest. The FBI cameras captured them clearly. Bright white spheres, about 3 feet in diameter, floating through the trees. They never approached the base camp, never interacted with the monitoring equipment. They just moved through the forest in complex geometric patterns before returning to the cave before dawn. It was during one of these nighttime appearances that we got our answer about what happened to Dr. Mitchell. I was on perimeter duty with Holly, watching the tree line through night vision equipment, when my radio crackled. "All units, we have movement approaching from the northeast, single individual on foot." Through the night vision, I could see a figure walking through the forest toward our position. Slowly, calmly, as if out for an evening stroll. As the figure got closer, I recognized the face from the photograph on the recording device. Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She walked right up to the perimeter, stopping about 20 feet from where Holly and I stood. In the harsh glare of our flashlights, I could see that she looked completely normal. Clean clothes, no signs of injury or distress. Except for her eyes. Her eyes were wrong. They reflected the light like an animal's eyes, showing a bright, unnatural gleam. "Dr. Mayer? Dr. Mitchell?" Holly called out. "Are you all right? We've been looking for you." Dr. Mitchell smiled, but the expression didn't reach those reflecting eyes. "I'm fine. Better than fine. I understand now. I've seen what exists in the deep places, and I've learned." Her voice was hers, but also not hers. There was something underneath it, like a second voice speaking in harmony. Director Hayes appeared beside us, recording device in hand. "Dr. Mitchell, where have you been for the past week?" "I've been learning, watching, understanding. The lights showed me such things, the history of this place, the purpose of the carvings, the truth about what lives beneath the earth." "What truth?" Dr. Mitchell's smile widened. "That we're not alone, that we never have been, that there are intelligences older than humanity living in the spaces we've forgotten. They've been watching us, waiting, learning. And now they want to teach. Teach what? How to see, how to understand, how to look up and recognize what's been there all along. She turned and pointed back toward the forest. Following her gesture, I saw them, the lights, dozens of them, emerging from the trees. They were forming a pattern, a complex geometric arrangement that hurt to look at. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" Dr. Mitchell said softly. "Once you let them in, once you let them show you, everything becomes clear. Tyler understood, I understand, and soon others will too." "Where's Tyler Morrison?" Director Hayes asked. "He's with them. He's part of them now, as am I, as all of us will be eventually. The seals are broken, the warnings are forgotten, and the lights are spreading." She took a step forward, and immediately 6 federal agents moved to intercept her. But she just laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl because it wasn't entirely human. "You can't contain this. You can barely understand it. But you will. Oh, you will. Look up." And despite every instinct telling me not to, I looked up. The sky above Wind Cave was filled with lights. Not stars. These were moving, swirling, forming patterns that my brain couldn't quite process. They were there and not there, visible and invisible, real and impossible all at once. And in that moment, I understood what the ancient peoples had been trying to warn us about, what they had sealed away with their rituals and their faith. Not monsters, not demons, but something far older and far stranger, an intelligence so alien, so fundamentally different from human consciousness that merely perceiving it changed you. The lights weren't threatening, they weren't evil, they were simply incomprehensible, and that incomprehensibility itself was the danger. Director Hayes grabbed my arm, pulling me back to reality. "Don't look at them. Don't try to understand them. That's how they get in." But it was too late for Dr. Mitchell, and possibly too late for Tyler Morrison, and maybe, eventually, too late for all of us. As federal agents moved to take Dr. Mitchell into custody, she offered no resistance. She just kept smiling that wrong smile and whispering the same words over and over. "Look up, look up, look up." Wind Cave was officially sealed 3 days later. The FBI brought in engineering teams who filled the entrance with concrete, then covered it with soil and replanted the area to make it look natural. The official story was that geological instability made the cave too dangerous for public access. But I know the truth. So does Holly. So does everyone who was there that night. The seals aren't physical. You can't contain this with concrete and steel. The ancient peoples understood that. Their seals were spiritual, mental, based on knowledge and respect for things beyond human understanding. And we broke those seals not with tools, but with arrogance, with our assumption that everything can be studied, measured, understood, that there are no mysteries left in the world. I still work for the Forest Service, still conduct inspections of caves and remote areas. But I'm more careful now. I pay attention to ancient markings, to local legends, to warnings carved in stone by people who knew better than we do. And sometimes, late at night, I wake up with those words echoing in my mind. Look up. I never do, because I know what I'll see. Lights in the darkness, patterns in the chaos, intelligence in the void. And once you see them, once you really understand what you're looking at, you can never unsee it. Tyler Morrison and Dr. Sarah Mitchell are officially listed as missing persons. But I saw Dr. Mitchell that night, saw what she'd become. And I know that whatever came back wearing her face wasn't entirely her anymore. The lights still appear in the Black Hills. Not just at Wind Cave, but at other locations. The FBI has teams monitoring dozens of sites now, trying to contain something that can't be contained, trying to understand something that defies understanding. And every time I see a report of unexplained lights in a remote area, Every time I hear about hikers or explorers going missing in cave systems, I wonder if this is how it spreads. Not through infection or invasion, but through curiosity, through our innate human need to explore, to discover, to understand. Because that's what makes us human, and that's what makes us vulnerable. The ancient peoples knew to look away, to seal the deep places and forget what lived there, to accept that some mysteries should remain unsolved. But we're modern, we're scientific, we're rational, and that might be exactly what destroys us. If you ever find yourself exploring a cave, any cave, and you see lights that shouldn't be there, don't investigate. Don't try to understand. Don't look up. Just run, and pray that whatever lives in the deep places hasn't already noticed you.